IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's my guy, Trevor Trowbridge. He is going through a little bit of a move this week, but he is like, you know what? It's 1 o'clock. It is time to buckle down and talk some Notre Dame football. Trevor, thank you for being with me today. How's everything going, man? You fired up? You ready to go? You ready to talk some Notre Dame football?
It's good, man. We've been packing boxes and signing leases and all that fun stuff. So ready to put that behind me for the next couple hours and talk some ball, man.
That's it, man. Look, today's topic let's just kind of go over the week a little bit. We're going to have 2 shows this week where we kind of break down the offense and defense at the break. Areas where, they're doing some good things, areas where there's definitely going to be some improvement needed. And the offense certainly fits into the category of area where there's a lot of improvement needed. We'll talk about that today. That's going to be the topic for today's show is the offense. We're going to go through we're going to go through different aspects of the offense and areas where we think things can be done now. It's not going to be talking about, should this coach be replaced or that coach? That's just a conversation that doesn't need to be had in week 5. That's more of an off-season conversation to be had. And so, we'll look at that. And then, of course, Trevor, tomorrow we'll have our BISO hold. Depending on what happens the next couple days is going to determine whether we have a couple other topics to discuss beforehand. But that'll definitely be the topic of conversation there. And then when we get into the Thursday show, we'll talk about the Notre Dame defense. And there's going to be a lot of things to discuss there because it's going to be tough to have the same group that you had when you started the season just because of all the injuries, and those continue to mount up, pile up. So we'll talk about that on Thursday. And then Friday we'll have our mailbag. So, and Trevor will be with me for all of them, I believe, is the plan as of right now. So I'm excited, Trevor, but a lot to talk about. And just in general, bye weeks are really a great time for a coaching staff, in my opinion, if you handle them correctly and if they come at the right time. Early buys can be challenging. I know a lot of teams have like buys in weeks 2 and 3, and I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of having buys after you've played some opponents you're just going to smash. I like having buys when you've played a handful of your games. Notre Dame's a game away from being at the midway point, and they've played arguably the 2 toughest games they're going to play this year. 2 of the 3, toughest games they're going to play this year. They've already played. The only other one that as of right now, as of what we know about teams right now, the only games that I think are going to necessarily be tougher than the 2 they've played is USC. Now, Army and Navy are playing in a way that those games might be a little bit tougher than we think, but the USC game is really that next one. And so you've got a good sense of who this Notre Dame team is. And, part of the reason you may look at a team like Notre Dame and say, I'm a little more concerned about this issue, that issue, is because they've been tested more. Notre Dame's been tested in a way that some teams haven't. Now, that's not to say that Notre Dame's on the same page as Ohio State or, the same page, because those teams have beat teams better than Northern Illinois, in my opinion. But it's more about they've had some of their quote unquote warts exposed a little bit more. The fact they've played a tougher slate so far. And your first 5 games, 4 of your 5 opponents you played are teams that went to bowl games last year. And so you now know, okay, you've been tested. You know where your strengths are. You know what some of your weaknesses are. And now you can go into the bye week and say, okay, where are we good? Let's build around that. Where do we need to get better? And let's make some improvements. And it gives you some time to sit back as a staff, self-scout a little bit, and think about areas where you need to get better. And that's what a lot of our focus will be on this week too, Trevor, is looking at it from that standpoint of how can this Notre Dame football team get better? Because look, they're not going to reinvent the wheel and come out in an air raid offense next weekend, right? Or triple option offense or whatever type of offense you think this team should run. They're going to work still within the confines of who they are, but there's certainly some tweaks and adjustments that need to be made, and this is a great time to make them.
Now is the perfect time for Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman and company to go back through and start to refine a lot of what they've learned about this team through the first 5 weeks, right? Notre Dame has had the luxury of playing 3 Power 5 teams already. 2 of them have been ranked. So really excited for what the coaching staff is going to dive in to see what's going to look different. Bryan, to your point, they're not going to come out schematically and run a completely new offense. Just not. It's going to be looking for the little nuances in the current offense that they have, the little tweaks that they can start making to improve the team here on out. So excited to dive into it with you today, man.
We'll get into that here as well, Trevor. I'm excited to talk about this with you too. But before we get going, folks, do me a favor, hit that like button. Go ahead and knock that out now. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you have not already done so. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you know when we go live. And of course, sign up for the message board at boards.oursbreakdown.com and enjoy all the great content and conversations that we have going on over there. So, Trevor, when we talk about the Notre Dame offense and we dive into just, okay, let's look at what are you going to be doing during the bye week? What are the things you focus on during the bye week? And the first thing is the bye week is really serves a threefold purpose. Number one is resting and healing up, right? Like football players, they get battled. They need to be able to figure some things out. The other part is obviously looking at who you are. What are you good at? What are your strengths as a football team? Coming into the season, I thought this team would throw the ball better than they have. I didn't know that they'd run the ball as well as they have. So, okay, your team is different. And now you've got to say, okay, this is what we know we're good at. This is what we think we're strong at. Let's build around that and keep pushing forward in that. And then the other part is, okay, where are we not good enough right now? And what can be done about it? Is it personnel changes? We'll talk about that. Is it personnel changes from a usage of your grouping standpoint? So there's personnel, actual players that maybe need to be changed. There's personnel groupings that may need to be adjusted, and we'll talk about that. And then there's, of course, some schematic changes that need to happen. And those usually aren't dramatic, but it's adjustments, it's wrinkles, it's doing more of this, doing a little bit less of that, and diving into those things. And we'll talk about that as well, Trevor. But really the first thing that to me, there needs to be a principle, and we don't know that this Notre Dame staff has this view. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying we don't know. This is a new offensive coordinator. You've got a new group of coaches. By the time we got to the first bye last year, they were 2/3 of the way through the season. And you don't really know what the mindset's going to be, because last season Notre Dame, coming out of different bye weeks and bye periods, it was strange, Trevor. It was kind of like, you went into the first bye last year, and that was, I believe, after the USC game, and you come out of that and you're playing lights out, right, for your first game against Pitt, and then you kind of you go back to your old ways against Clemson, and not a lot changed. You have another bye week, and you come out, and out of the second bye week, Notre Dame rolled. Dominated Wake Forest, dominated Stanford, and of course dominated the bowl game. All three inferior opponents. Obviously, Oregon State was a good football team, but Oregon State was a very beat-up football team by that point. Not beat up, I should say, depleted football team by that point in time because of all the losses. And as we said at the time, Notre Dame losing Joe Alt is going to have a whole different impact than the other team losing some guys, because at the end of the day, Notre Dame can put Charles Jagusah in the game and Oregon State can't. And so we talked about that, but you did see some of those adjustments and some of those changes to how they're doing things. And we did see some minor adjustments, but it was more about just getting healthy. You look at the first bye week in Marcus Freeman's first year, came after the North Carolina game. They came out early against BYU and played well, and then kind of sputtered in the second half. The next week went and laid an egg against Stanford, didn't play great against UNLV. And so, you didn't really come out of the bye week doing a whole lot in your first year. So I'm very curious to see if this bye week proves to be more fruitful than what it has been for Notre Dame in the past, because the last two of the three buys that Marcus Freeman has had last year, they had 2 buys. You've lost one of your first 2 games coming out of the bye to teams that you had no business losing to. You lost to Stanford 2 years ago, and then last year you lost to a Clemson team that ended up ranked, but the only reason they ended up ranked is because they beat you, and they were a team that was out 8 starters and just had no business losing that game, in my opinion. And so you haven't really seen this team come out of the bye week red hot. But this is also a different year. It's a different staff. Marcus Freeman is now in year 3. And we need to now find out if this team can kind of thrive and handle things in a certain way. So and to answer the question, last year Notre Dame did not have a bye week after Navy. They played the next Saturday. So they did not have a bye. Their first bye came after the USC game. So, Trevor, we got to find out what mentality this team is going to have. And in my opinion, my hope is that this staff goes into the bye week offensively differently than the defense is going to be about tweaking. The offense needs to come in and say everything is on the table. There's nothing set in stone as far as what our top plays are. There's nothing set in stone in regard to what our lineup is going to look like, what personnel groupings that we're going to emphasize, our emphasis from a pass standpoint. Yeah, we like this play a lot, but it's not working. So A, we need to figure out ways to get it working, or B, we need to do some other things. I really hope that this staff goes into the first couple days of this bye week as an offensive staff and says everything is on the table. I mean, nobody's role is locked into what it is from the standpoint of, it's not like you're going to say, okay, let's bench Jeremiah Love. It's more so, okay, how do we adjust his role? Everything is on the table in regard to what you're doing with this football team. And that to me is the biggest thing. Is it's got to be the proper mindset, Trevor, because if your mindset isn't, hey, we're not just a play here, a play, like this team is getting closer, but there's like to being good, but they are so far away from being an offense that can help you go compete for a championship. It's not even funny. I don't know that they can get there, but if they're going to get there, the adjustments and changes you make this week that you can then implement for the next 3 games before your next bye are going to be vitally important to this group turning the corner and getting rocking and rolling. And it's got to be more than just let's heal up and we'll be okay.
Agreed. And this question, this goes beyond just execution, to your point, Bryan. It's not, if we clean this up here and clean this up here, the offense is going to start rolling. And we have seen spurts, and we have gotten, I don't want to say teased a little bit, but we've gotten almost a little bit of a preview to what this offense could potentially look like, right? Notre Dame's offense broke open against Purdue and kind of hit a little bit of a lull against Miami of Ohio, but then started pushing the ball down the field. And then for the first 3 drives against Louisville, things started to open up a little bit, and it started to look promising. And then in between the second and third quarter, you have 60 total yards of offense. So there's things that definitely need cleaned up. As far as the bye week is concerned, it's almost like the next 2 to 3 weeks is going to be interesting to watch it unfold for how Notre Dame goes. Because last year it was, you have the bye week after USC, you roll a Pitt team, and then the week after that, you come out a little flat against Clemson, and then you lose that game, right? In 2022, Notre Dame has a bye week after North Carolina. They beat a BYU team. That was pretty good. They were ranked. And then the next week you come out and have that showing against Stanford. So for me, it's going to be not only how do you look immediately after the bye week, but it's going to be how do you consistently get your players, again, that time-old conversation with Marcus Freeman, how do you consistently get your team ready to play on a week-to-week basis, whether there's a bye week or whether there's not a bye week. So those are all going to be things that I'm going to be looking for. You're going to have to find different creative ways to get your playmakers the ball, because let's call a spade here. Notre Dame has 7 games left guaranteed on their schedule. And it's not good enough anymore to just say, well, we're running inside zone to Jeremiah Love and we're going to wait for him to break one. You're going to have to get creative with the different ways to get the ball into your playmakers' hands, because right now, Notre Dame, as far as the pass game goes, doesn't have that go-to guy yet. And they're going to have to get into some sort of rhythm in that passing game, because when the game's on the line, it's not going to be good enough anymore to just say, hey, let's run inside zone to the right to Jeremiah Love and see what happens.
It's not just about how do you get your playmakers the ball, Trevor. That's part one. The guys that we've got to figure out a way to get 4 and 24 and 13 rolling in every game.
Yep.
The problem is right now, those are really your only 3 playmakers. Bo Collins has shown flashes of that, but has not done it consistently. Mitchell Evans is a shell of himself from last season. Like it just, in a lot of ways, and we'll talk about that as the show goes on. Chris Mitchell hasn't been the player that you hoped he could be. Jaden Greathouse hasn't been as dynamic as you hoped he would be. That doesn't mean those guys get benched for other players. It could also be, okay, well, how can we do a better job of getting Jaden Greathouse more involved in the offense? How, can we get Chris Mitchell more involved in the offense? How do we get, Bo Collins going in ways where we're not just using him on quick outs and tunnels all game? We got to find some other ways to get Bo the football. And so those are all part of what we go into. And like the Mitchell Evans conversation, I know we'll talk more about it, and you already see in the chat, like he's still hurt. That seems obvious. Like, Well, maybe. I hope so. But if he is, you need to think about resting him because one of two things is happening with Mitchell Evans. One is he's got a really bad attitude and he's not giving very good effort. And you need to not play him because of that, honestly, as long as Cooper Flanagan's healthy. Or B, he's legitimately still not healthy and he's gritting it out. And if that's true, I'd say sit him and get him healthy. Whether it's for a game, 2 game, or maybe you consider sitting him for the bye. Because right now, what we're seeing from Mitchell Evans is not, you're not helping him. He's not helping you. And if it is truly a health thing, he's not effective. And you need to get him healthy because with all due respect, if you can't beat Stanford, Georgia Tech, and Navy, who are your next 3 opponents, without Mitchell Evans, you got major problems. And I don't know that this version of Mitchell Evans necessarily helps you beat those teams very much, if I'm being honest. And so if he is banged up, this is something you need to consider. Now, it could be, Trevor, that this week off is something that helps Mitchell Evans come out of the bye week, refreshed, and hopefully that's the case. But that's what I'm saying. Like, everything right now is on the table for this football team because you'd like to say, hey, 88 is a guy you want to build your offense around 100%, but not this version of 88. And that's the thing they have to figure out is maybe it's okay. We're going to give him the bye and Stanford week to rest and get right. And then we'll try to get him back for Georgia Tech. If it is an injury thing. And I hope this is going to sound terrible. I hope it's an injury thing because if it's not, then that's a bigger problem. But if it's an injury thing, and because this is what we were talking about last night, Trevor, is you could take one action by a player and it could mean 2 completely different things. So I watched Riley Leonard go on a long touchdown run and I watched 9 other guys run down to the end zone and I watched Mitchell Evans run right over to the sideline. And that tells me one of 2 things. One, he's, attitude's not where it needs to be. He's not celebrating with his teammates. Or B, he's got a banged up knee and he doesn't want to run all the way to the end zone for 50 yards and then run all the way back to the sideline. You know what I mean? So like, that's why you got to be careful not reading into certain actions. And I'm saying that to myself as well. I hope that it's a knee injury, the knee injury not being healthy but if it is, you've got to get that fixed because he's bringing no value to your offense right now. And that's a disappointing thing to watch him and Eli Raridon. And we'll get more into that later. But the point of it is, that is an example of right now, everything is on the table and everyone's being evaluated by what they've done this season. That includes Riley Leonard. We're 5 games in. We can't talk about what he was at Duke anymore. It's who are you now? Mitchell Evans, 5 games in. It's not about what you did last year before the knee injury. This is who you are. And you just kind of go down that line and say, okay, well, what's this football team going to be? What's this football team going to do? Okay, I know what Chris Mitchell did at Florida International, but that's not what he's doing at Notre Dame right now. So what does that mean? Does that mean you got to figure out a way to get him going, or does that mean you need to find somebody else out there? That's what I mean, Trevor, when I say everything is on the table, and that includes who's playing on Saturdays. So and if you don't have that mindset, now listen, you don't change everything. You can't. You don't have enough time. You can't go through another fall camp. But when you evaluate everything, then you can start to zero in on what are the 4, 5, 6 things that can have the biggest impact coming. Like, okay, we evaluated that. There's the things we like. We like a lot of what we're doing, but maybe a couple tweaks over here are going to make that thing go a lot better. And those are what we talk about. We say everything's on the table. It doesn't mean you're changing everything about your offense.
It allows you to look at the first 5 games, so a little bit over 40% of your season. And to your point, Brian, take away, hey, these are the things that we really like, and these are the things that we need to adjust, whether it's from a schematic standpoint or from a personnel grouping standpoint. So what Notre Dame is going to have to do on offense, and I don't want to paint the picture that nobody's safe. I'm not saying that after the bye week, Notre Dame's going to have a new starting quarterback and a new starting tight end, but there are things that you have to evaluate to continue to play to these players' strengths and mitigate the risk of falling into their weaknesses starting to show, right? So there's going to be a lot that Mike Denbrock is going to have to sit down and discuss with his position coaches because, like we're going to talk about later in the show, there are some players that are going to be on an extremely short leash coming out of the bye. I know we're kind of using Mitchell Evans as the example here, but to your point, if it's either an injury or it's an attitude thing, both avenues lead to him getting some time off.
Yeah.
And that's what people have to keep in mind. I'm not here to slander Mitch Evans. Great kid. We saw the potential that he had in that spurt last year, and he could be a very valuable part of the offense. But if it's an injury thing, 100%. And if it's an injury thing, to your point, Brian, we're going into week 5. Sorry, we are through week 5. And it's not enough anymore for Notre Dame coaches to say, well, Mitchell Evans, he's somebody that the defense is going to have to identify, and they have to know where 88 is at all times.
And
it's not.
They're not really keying him the way that they were, because they watch film and they say 100%. That he's not the guy he was last year.
100%. Whether it's an emotional, mental thing or it's a physical thing, both things are keying on him not playing to his fullest capability, which we got a glimpse of last year. So it's going to be interesting to see what the coaching staff decides to do with players like Mitchell Evans, and he is not the only person. He's just one of the ones that
he's the most glaring, Trevor, because of your expectations and of him coming into the season and what you hoped he could be. And my whole thing is, again, if you're Notre Dame, you are a team where right now your offense isn't good enough to say, hey, you're going to be able to get to the playoff and make a deep run, but it can be. But I'll say this: at the end of the day, here's the one thing that we know, and I'm basically going to start working with the thought of it's got to be a knee thing. It's like we talked a lot about Mitchell last night. I got to believe it's a knee thing, because this is a kid from the minute he got to Notre Dame attitude has never been something that's been an issue for him. You know, he's kind of accepted whatever role that was needed of him. And so when I watch him play the way he did on Saturday, and I see the bad body language that I saw against Miami of Ohio, and I see the bad body language from Saturday, dude, I got to think there's more. There's a lot. Like, I don't think it can be a thing where it's like, oh, he's not getting a ball, because he caught more balls in the first 5 games this year than he caught in the first 4 or 5 last year. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's got to be that he's not feeling right. And if that's true, you got to get him some time to heal up, because at the end of the day, Trevor, you can't be the offense in November and in December and hopefully January that you need to be to compete against those best teams if 88's not right. And if that means you got to, because like, here's the thing. If, you sit him for 3 games and that's not good, but if you sit him for these next 3 games, let's just say hypothetically, he's getting 5 weeks off because there's 2 byes sandwiched between those 2 games. And if he comes back healthy and you're able to get through these next 3 games, you say, well, now he's only got 4 games left. Well, maybe he could end up having 7 games left because if he comes back and he gets right, and your offense can make some improvements, now you're capable of saying, hey, let's win a couple games in the postseason. And, so they're just going to have to find ways to get them right. But that's a lot. But that's all part of this process, Trevor, of getting your team right, getting everything being on the table, whether it's injuries, whether it's attitude, whether it's production, whether it's, assignment, execution, whatever the case may be. They need to be able to look into this and say, okay, everything, we're going to evaluate everything and start to make some changes. So Trevor, let's dive into here next what we think those things need to be when we talk about it. But again, I just want to reiterate with everybody, we're going to talk about personnel changes first. We're going to get into the run game second, pass game third, of some different things. So we got a lot of this. We're going to try to segment it a little bit so you guys are able to kind of follow along. But right now, it's going to be about just what we think Notre Dame should do based on what we see. This is not us telling you what Notre Dame is going to do. This isn't giving you insider information. This is what we think Notre Dame should do as we get into the next 3 games. All right, Trevor, the first thing is Notre Dame needs to think through their personnel. And there's a couple different ways and avenues we're going to talk about this. So we're going to first talk about the offensive line. Then we're going to talk about the wide receivers. And then we'll briefly talk about the tight ends again, just more specifically. And then we'll get into running backs. And then finally, we're going to talk about the quarterback position and some potential personnel changes there. But and it'll not always be like, okay, this guy needs to play and this guy needs to sit. And some of these is going to be about, okay, these are the guys you're playing, but are you playing the right guys together or in the right ways? And we'll have that conversation as well. But I mean, there's the first place you got to start, Trevor, is the offensive line. And when you look at the offensive line is yes, this is a beat up group. We get it. You're down 3 starters. But there's 2 things you can do. You can either say, well, we're down 3 starters, so let's just get through this year as best we can and be as good as we can be and accept that we're not a championship team and get ready for next year. Or you can say, all right, well, this is who we are. Let's figure out ways to get better and become the best version of ourselves that we can be. Because when I look at this offensive line, yes, losing Billy Schrouth hurt. We don't know if he's going to come back. We don't know when he's going to come back if he does. And we don't know how healthy he's going to be when he comes back. Hopefully he's healthy and he's good to go. Ashton Craig is done for the year. Obviously, Charles Jagasol's done for the year. Those are big losses. But when I look at this football team, I say there's way too much talent sitting on the sidelines for them to just keep being okay with what we're seeing on Saturday, what we saw on Saturday in a lot of different ways. And then, of course, what we've seen in the previous games from a pass protection standpoint. So, I mean, right now, Trevor, the reality is the offensive line is playing hard. I'll give them that. I thought they competed their butts off on Saturday, but playing hard only gets you so far, and especially against the better teams in the schedule. There has to be some level of good execution and good technique and good play that gets into it. And right now, I'm sympathetic to part of the issue that they had with a little bit of the up and downness is because they just haven't been able to put the same lineup on the field with any consistency. You had basically 2 games in a quarter with the original starting lineup, right, which was after Jagasol's injury. And then you've had now basically 2.5 games to get used to the lineup that you have now, which has, the new center and the new right guard. And so you go into the bye week, say, okay, well, do we want to just keep trotting this line out there and let it get better together? Or is now the perfect time to make some changes? And I don't know the answer to that, but right now I will say this. You need to be open to making some changes, Trevor, because there's some coaching things that need to get fixed, which we'll address, but they need to really rethink during the bye week who's playing where. And I would argue that Anthony Knapp's coming off probably the best game he's played in pass protection. He was okay in the run game, but even his best game was still substandard for what you need from a left tackle at Notre Dame. And the left side of the line especially, yes, you're doing really well in the run game, and that's why they started, and it worked early, but teams have kind of figured that out, and now you can't protect the quarterback. And your quarterback is now playing with no confidence in the left side of his offensive line. That is very clear. That doesn't excuse all the issues that Riley Leonard has. He's got things that he's got to work on that are on him. But I can tell you, as a former quarterback, you were a former quarterback. If you don't have faith in the left side of your offensive line as a right-handed quarterback, you're going to be really uncomfortable going through your reads the way you need to go through your reads and throwing that ball with confidence. So you've got to be able to look at the line and with the way Anthony Knapp is playing and the fact that he's just like I think Anthony Knapp. Here's the interesting thing: as poorly as he's played, I'm actually more optimistic about his future than I was when Notre Dame signed him, because I know that you give that kid a year or two in the strength program with the toughness we've seen, and you put him at the right position, which is guard or center, this kid's got a chance to be a dude, and I didn't think he had a chance to be a dude. He's not a left tackle. He may have been your best option day one of fall camp, but it's time to go back to the drawing board and see. And unless Anthony Knapp makes a big jump coming out by that we have to, with a true freshman, we have to hold open the possibility that if Anthony Knapp gets trotted out there against Stanford, it's because the bye week allowed him to take a step back, rethink things, get his technique right, adjust to some things, dive into the film, look at things the teams are doing to him to give him some problems, and then he gets better. That could happen. But if you're the Notre Dame coaching staff, you also need to give some other people some chances to battle that position. And I think I've seen enough in limited snaps of Gerby Lambert to say you need to try him at left tackle. I think you need to give Sullivan Absher a shot at left tackle, and you need to see what Tosh Baker can do at left tackle. Because if Tosh is healthy, and I don't know that he is, I've seen Tosh play better than what we've seen from Anthony Knapp, and I saw him do it in the bowl game. Now, could he do it as a left tackle? I don't know. You say, well, he's not a consistent pass blocker. Neither's your current left tackle. Well, he's not as good as a run blocker. I understand that, but you have one of the worst passing offenses in college football, and your inability to protect the quarterback is a big reason why. Right? So I don't know if Tosh is the answer. I don't know if Sullivan Absher is the answer. I don't know if Gerby Lambert's the answer. But you need to find out if they might be during this bye week. Flat out. You need to see if they're – because you can't just say, well, he was the best guy in August, so he's going to be the best guy the rest of the year. You can't just assume that. And they have to figure something else out. They have to, because you're not doing right by Anthony Knapp. And you're definitely not doing right by your quarterback with a guy that can't pass. And I understand. Yeah, he can run block. Okay, then move him to right tackle and or right guard or something. Like he's not a left tackle. He's not a left tackle this level. And so they're going to have to find ways to fix this position, whether it's he gets better, you help him more, or you find somebody else. I don't know which option is best. I'm not sitting here advocating bench Anthony Knapp. I'm not doing that. But you need to let those other guys genuinely go out there and get opportunities in this bye week and then heading into the Stanford week to say, hey, look, we're going to give Gerby Lambert the third series or in the fifth series, or we're going to give Sullivan Absher the third or the fifth series or something like that and see what they can do. Because I have a hard time believing that Anthony Knapp is going to go from what we've seen to a guy that can, be part of getting this thing fixed moving forward. But I hope that he is, but you got to figure something out, because what we're seeing at left tackle, it limits the effectiveness of the offense. And now that you don't have Billy Schrouth on the right side at guard, and you've got two guys that aren't great pass blockers at center and right guard, and Sam Pendleton hasn't been a great pass blocker so far this season, although he was a little bit better actually as a straight up pass blocker in the game against Louisville. And again, I thought Anthony had his best one-on-one pass blocking game so far at Notre Dame, but they still struggle with the same line games they've struggled with all year. Maybe that gets fixed in the bye week and they get better, but they got to figure something else out, because this left tackle situation this left side of the O-line, especially left tackle situation, has been debilitating to the offense so far this season when it comes to be able to drop back and throw the football.
A lot of the issues that Notre Dame's passing game is facing, I firmly believe, starts up front. Bryan, you get it. We both played the position. And a lot of the gripe has come from, well, Notre Dame can't push the ball down the field, and Notre Dame can't attack the middle of the field. In order to do that, you need time. You need time, and the confidence in the person protecting your blind side will handle his job. It's no mystery that a lot of the passing scheme now is sprint out to the right, get the ball out quick. There's a lot of things that I firmly believe that Mike Denbrock wants to do in the passing game that he might just not have the ability to do, because if the offensive line isn't getting their job done from a pass pro standpoint, it's really hard because you're going to start asking your quarterback to take a lot of unnecessary hits. And when Riley Leonard is averaging 13 to 14 touches on the ground per game, can't ask him to take anything else additional, right? Anthony Knapp, I'm in the same boat as you, Bryan. I think put in the right position, he could be an extremely good offensive lineman. Not to say that he's been awful and god-awful now, but
he's been pretty good as a run blocker. Like, that's the thing. Like, you can't ignore that. I mean, his blocking against A&M, him and Pendleton's run blocking against A&M was a big reason why you were able to have the success that you've had. So it's why it's not like just throw him aside and say, screw Anthony Knapp, put him on the bench, he's terrible. It's not that. This has to be better from a pass pro standpoint. If he's not the answer, you got to find somebody else that can be. And if he is the answer, then you need to figure it out, and he needs to play better. And
I didn't think the length and the size conversation was going to be as big of a factor as it was going to, but calling a spade, it is, unfortunately. And that's not on Anthony Knapp. It's not his fault that he doesn't have longer arms. It's not his fault that he's not taller, right? It's the questions around Anthony Knapp is not about effort or aggressiveness. It's nothing like that, but there is a lapse somewhere.
I actually think Anthony has pretty good length. I don't think that's my issue as much and I think he's got some pop. I think he's not super comfortable playing in space, and he's light, and he can just be tossed. He's just not in a position where in space when he's retreating, and that's why I think playing inside would be better, because when he comes off the line in the run game, he doesn't get tossed because he's coming forward. I think he's got that strength. He's able to get driving, but it's the receding, it's the giving ground where he just gets tossed. He gets abused because he is light, and that I don't know that you can fix that in the middle of the season, right? And so they're going to have to find some answers. I don't know what that answer is, but they're going to have to figure it out, because whatever you decide, left tackle has to get better. It's not going to get dramatically better by putting someone else in the game. It's not. But if it can get, and at this point in time, I would take a loss in the run game to if I knew I was going to get a significant jump in the throwing game. But here's the rub: if you're not getting a significant jump in the throwing game, and you're taking a loss in the running game, then that's not the answer either. And that's the kind of the conundrum that Notre Dame is in, because you can't, as frustrating as watching Anthony Knapp pass block is, if I were to put in a run game only cut up of the last few games, you'd be like, okay, what's your beef with Anthony Knapp? I don't understand what your problem is with Anthony Knapp. I just watched your run game cut up of the Miami game and the A&M game and the Purdue game, and that guy's pretty freaking good. Exactly. That's you know what I mean? Which is why he's starting a left tackle. I mean, that's the reason why he's starting a left tackle. Yeah. It's just you can't have the left tackle different at right tackle. If my right tackle's not great in pass, bro, if he's a dominant run block, you kind of live with it a little bit and you help him out. But left tackle's a different animal because the quarterback can't see that. Yeah. I keep telling people that, and that's what we're going to have to find out is what that answer is. I think there's some other things they need to figure out. Sam Pendleton's a guy that I don't know that I'm in a position where I want to take Sam off the field, because I think if you put a highlight together of the 10 best, and I've said this before, if you put a highlight together of the 10 best run blocks of the season, probably half of them are Sam Pendleton's. Yeah. Like, Anthony's been good in the run game. Sam's downright dominant at times in the run game. I think the issue Sam's having in the last couple games is I just think he's kind of mentally worn with everything thrown at him. I think this bye week is going to be great for Sam. Yeah. Obviously, as I've said, everything is on if he's healthy. I know he went out of the game, and who knows, the way that this is going for Notre Dame, when a guy goes out, more often than not, he's out for a while. Hopefully that's not the case with Sam. But if Sam is healthy, I think this bye week is good for him, because I just think he needs to get his head right. It needs to be a reevaluate, watch some film, look at some of the areas where he's regressed a little bit and fix it, because, the issue on the left side is more so a combination of the two as opposed to each one individually. Sure. And if you can fix one, then I can live with the other a little bit. But that's the thing with Sam is I think Sam has been your most dominant run blocker all season. And I don't know that I want to lose that from my left guard and my left tackle. That's the rub. Unless you're going to put someone in there that you can think can be as dominant in the run game. So Sam Pendleton's a little bit of a different situation. But as I said before, when you've got talented players like Gerby Lambert, Sullivan Absher, you've got to be able to say, okay, we've got to find a way to get these guys in the field. And maybe something that would help Sam is some sort of rotation. Maybe something to help Anthony would be that. I don't know the answer to that. That's something they have to consider. Because I think Sullivan Absher and Gerby Lambert are too talented, and even what we've seen from them in games is the same thing. Boy, there's a lot of talent there to work with, and Gerby's gotten better each time we've seen him get on the field in some of these end-of-game situations. They got to figure out a way to get that kid on the field, because he is a very talented football player. You can see it on film. He's massive, and they're going to have to figure it out, because you're not going to be the line you hoped you would be before fall camp started. You don't have Charles Jagasol. You don't have Gerby. You don't have Ashton Craig, and right now you don't have Billy. So you got to figure out, okay, what's our best five now? I know what you thought it was for August 31st, and that's fine. And that probably was your best option for August 31st. Is it still? That's a question that needs to be answered. And I want to make sure people understand. I don't know for a fact that making a change is the best option. Sure. It could just be get those young kids right. They won those starting jobs for a reason. But you have to at least consider it. You know, you have to consider, okay, what about right guard? I thought Rocco played great against Miami of Ohio. I thought Rocco played his butt off against Louisville, but he didn't necessarily play well. Did you help him play well by the way that you're running your run game? So those are different things too. But as I said, everything right now is on the table. The only guy that I would look at and say, I think you're good there is Emil Wagner.
Yeah.
He didn't play great against he had his worst game against Louisville, but was pretty good the first 4 games. And I've gone back and forth, Trevor, about the possibility of maybe moving Emil to left tackle. But at the end of the day, you know, I still worry about him having a little bit of lightness. You know, we have seen him, you know, get knocked back a little bit. But the other part too is I don't feel comfortable moving your right tackle, who you know has been good, to left tackle. And now you're taking a hit at 2 spots. That's at the end of the day the reason I'd be hesitant to do that, unless you just flat out like, okay, he's ready to do this. They've said in the past he's not comfortable playing left-handed. If you move Emil, this is the problem. Whenever you move one player from a spot to fix another spot, you're now impacting 2 positions as opposed to figure out left tackle and let's just keep rolling with the right tackle doing what he's doing because we know that position's good. If you move him to left tackle and he doesn't play well and your right tackle doesn't play as well as he played, now you're even worse. You've made the problem worse.
Sure.
And so those are different things you have to consider. And I don't know where this staff is, to be honest with you, when it comes to that. But like I said, they need Lambert and Absher this week need to get the reps ramped up and say, hey, and I would even consider moving both of them to left tackle during the bye and seeing if one of them can, you know, be comfortable there.
Agreed. All options are on the table. My only concern with Emil Wagner would be, and you touched on it, that was an option almost immediately after Jagasaw went down. So if he was going to be the guy to step in at left tackle, I think he would have gotten more serious looks there during fall camp. Now, I personally don't know what the day-to-day practice looked like for them. So he might have, but I think to your point, you don't want to try to solve an issue by creating another one in moving Emil. So I think he's been your most consistent offensive lineman through the first 5 games. So I think his situation is pretty solidified at right tackle. But you hit the nail on the head. There's too much talent sitting and marinating there on the bench that could come in and make an impact at left tackle. But to be fair, Anthony Knapp might have just needed the rest. Who knows? Right? He is a great run blocker. There's things that need cleaned up in the passing game, and it's very obvious. And I think these next 2 to 3 games before their next bye week, before they get into the latter part of their season where they're going to make the playoff push, it's going to be a lot of evaluating at left tackle what this pass protection is going to look like. Because Notre Dame's not going to make a playoff run by running 5-yard sprint outs to start pushing the ball down the field. Because Riley Leonard has shown that when he does get time, he can push the ball down the field. But he needs time and that comfortability to start making those decisions, and it does live up front. So all things are on the table at this point, and that is not Bryan and I coming in over the top saying, bench this kid. Not at all. If Anthony Knapp's the guy, he's the guy. But you are going to have to start getting creative. Mike Denbrock is going to have to start thinking a little bit deeper. Joe Rudolph is going to have to start thinking a little bit deeper of what they can do to make that left side of the offensive line not a liability in pass protection.
There also needs to be a lot of stuff cleaned up, Trevor, from the standpoint of pass pro. And I'm looking actually at our notes, and I'm wondering, like, where did we have? So yeah, we'll get into that a little bit in the pass game, but we'll talk more about that. But there's a lot of coaching things that need to happen too from a technical standpoint, but the personnel wise is there. The next area that needs to be addressed is the wide receiver position. This has been probably my biggest disappointment of the season, is the receiving core. And I've been someone who in the past has really defended the receivers in the way that they've played, because I felt like they weren't the problem. And they're still not the problem. There's a lot of things going wrong, but it's got to be better. And there's a lot of different things going on. Like, offensive line is a problem, but you kind of understand it. Like, that's why I don't love what I'm seeing from Joe Rudolph from a technical standpoint, and the protection that's being taught is a problem, and there's way too many missed assignments from veteran players and all. But like, they're playing hard, and you're down 3 starters. So I mean, I'm kind of sympathetic, and I want to, be more understanding of why the line has struggled. When I look at what's happening with the receivers, you don't have that excuse. There's nobody hurt. You've got a 1,000-yard guy from last year that went on the road against an SEC team and had 6 catches for 157 yards, and he can't do more than a catch or two a game. He's getting no separation. You haven't been found a way to get Bo Collins more involved. He's got kind of had in spurts, but you're running him on 3 or 4 types of routes. You're not getting Jaden Greathouse going. He starts off early and then kind of fades late. Not that he faded, but as far as getting the ball, you see KK Smith come against Purdue and he just runs by guys, and then we've barely seen him since then. Your Jaden Thomas has been your best clutch pass catcher, and he plays very rarely in the pass game. And then you've got some really talented freshmen on the sidelines, and Jordan Faison's been in and out of the lineup. That's the only one that's been injured, but I'm sorry, your receiving core isn't fading because you don't have Jordan Faison. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. And this group just hasn't been good enough. And I think there's a lot of reasons why. And now we've got to find out if this staff is going to be able to push the right buttons. And here's one thing that I've said. Look, I like a deep receiver rotation. I'm a big fan of that. But you've got to use it correctly. And I don't know if through the first 5 games, this staff showed that they had a great feel for what these kids do well. Each individual kid does well. And I don't believe that they've necessarily put them in positions to go out and be as effective as they can be. Now, part of that's on them. Part of that's on you as a coach. Like, okay, this kid's really good at this, so let's ask him to do that. And that's what you need to see more of. And so they need to think about who's playing where. Well, who's playing, period. Who's playing where? How are we using them? That's the first thing that they need to figure out, because this is a week where I'm going to basically say to my receiving core, hey, guys, I need everybody to raise their game. And if you're playing a lot and you don't raise your game, maybe you're not going to play as much. And if you're someone who's not playing a lot and you want to play more, this is the week to go out there and prove it to me that you need to be out there on the field. Because, again, nobody at receiver is playing well enough to say your spot's locked down. Nobody, including Bo, including Jaden Greathouse. Now, those are the 2 that I think most likely – are going to still be out there and should, honestly, from what we've seen. But how do their roles change? Do they play more? Do they play less? Do they play? There's all types of different things that need to be on the table. But there's a couple players at receiver that they need to kind of sit down with and say, hey, man, we need to get more from you. And so I need you to do this, and here's what we're going to do on our end. Because, like one guy's Chris Mitchell. Let's be honest. But I don't think the Chris Mitchell needs to get right conversation is a one-way street. I don't think it's just, hey, Chris, you need to play harder, play better. You need to run routes better, those type of things. That's all true. I mean, he's not playing with the speed that I've seen him on film play with. I mean, I talked to Cole Kubelic this summer who covered him at FIU, and he's like, that guy can fly. This is a guy that literally just does SEC games. He knows what speed looks like. And I'm looking at him like, well, what happened when he got to Notre Dame? Are you using him in ways that are real, that he's comfortable? Is he playing hard? Is he when I say a receiver's not playing hard, there's one of 2 ways that can be. One is he's not playing hard. The other is he's still not comfortable with what you're asking him to do. And so he's not going fast. And so that's another part of it, Trevor, when you look at it, is you've got to figure out, how can we get Bo Collins more involved in these areas? How can we get Chris Mitchell more involved in these areas? And look at some of the things that they do well and how that fits in your offense, because I do think you need both of them. I don't think it's as simple as just put them on the bench and put somebody else in there. But if you can't get them right, then maybe that's what you do need to do. But I think that needs to happen. Then I think they also need to consider ramping up snaps for KK Smith, because he's the one guy I've seen come off the line and explode past people this season. And they need to figure out a way to get him back out there. And I know he dropped the ball, but everybody's dropped balls so far. And he needs to get an opportunity to get out there and play a little bit more, in my opinion.
With wide receivers, it's so easy to look and live or die based off of like one drop here, one missed opportunity here. Wide receiver is a tough position to play, man. You have to go out and run your routes and block your butt off for 60 minutes. And there's a chance you might get thrown to 2 or 3 times. And that's just the life of a wide receiver, unfortunately. It's tough. I think you hit the nail on the head with Chris Mitchell. because Marcus Freeman has a saying that I love. It's, clarity equals velocity. And Chris Mitchell looks like a guy that's just uncomfortable with what he's doing right now or what he's asked to do, which brings in the coaching question, which brings in the, hey, Mike Brown, what are we asking these guys to do? Mike Denbrock. Sometimes it is just as simple as let your fast guys go be fast guys. Sometimes it is that simple because that's what Chris Mitchell's really, really good at doing. Now, on the flip side of that coin, it's tough. I think the wide receiver rotation needs adjusted. I love Jordan Faison. I think he came back onto the field too quickly. He was playing on half an ankle at the Louisville game, in my opinion. And
they got hurt again.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not going to convince me that KK Smith couldn't have gone out there to do what was asked of Jordan Faison, because now who knows how long Jordan Faison is going to be out again. And you're just restarting that physical therapy process over again. To me, I heard a lot about Micah Gilbert coming out of the spring and how he's one of the guys that's going to be ready to go.
And he made plays.
Play. Yeah.
And we haven't seen him at all.
So
like
I think
mop-up duty. That's it.
100%. And the weird thing is, to me, is I don't know if it's just the wide receiver room, if it's Mike Denbrock, if they just got so wrapped up in we're only doing a 6-man rotation and it can only be 6 people. I don't know if that's what the case was, but you have to be open to putting the guys on the field that are going to go out and make plays, because so far there hasn't been that go-to pass catcher on I mean, Jaden Thomas arguably on 3rd and short, but there hasn't been
him and Bo have been your 2 most clutch receivers so far.
100%.
It's not even close.
But there hasn't been, and even with Bo Collins, I don't know if I can look at this Notre Dame offense and say, you know what? Game's on the line. You're down by 4. You got 50 seconds left in the game, and you got to drive down the field to score. I don't know who that go-to person is going to be.
Well, the only reason that I'll say right now, I do think you can feel confident saying that it's Bo Collins, is because we did see him do that against A&M.
True.
I mean, 13-13 game, Bo goes out and makes a phenomenal. Now, he had a Jordan Clark moment at the end of the play that they got lucky didn't get called, but he did go make that play.
Yeah.
You look at so when he's got like the Louisville game, Bo had a bad drop. He had a bad game. I mean, I do think it's that simple. I mean, Purdue, he came out and was playing well early, had some clutch catches early. So I understand where you're coming from, but I feel like with the exception of Saturday, every time Bo's had a chance to make a play, he's made it. He just but it's like, to your point though, is I think the you don't know that yet because your entire pass game as a whole has been clunky and slow and methodical and not sharp. And that's something that has to improve. Maybe it's, look, because here's the other thing too, is accept who you are as a team. If you're just going to do what there's 2 things that frustrate me more than anything else. It's when people say, well, the receivers aren't running hard because Riley Leonard doesn't get them the ball, or the receivers aren't running hard because the head coach says this. And I'm like, that's not how football is supposed to work. Not for good teams. It's, you have a job to do and you go do that job. And that's, if you can't, then I'll find someone else that can do it. Your job is to run fast and get open. You can't control what the quarterback does. And so there needs to be some semblance of, the players have to take some accountability for the fact that they're not playing as hard or as fast or as folks they need to be. But at the same time, it's your job as coaches to put those players in position to be successful. And if you're going to have a guy like Chris Mitchell on the field, then have they thrown him one deep ball all year? Where you just drop back and say, hey, man, one-on-one coverage. The first time we get cover 1 press cornerbacks, you're looking at Chris, you're giving him the nod, and then he knows he's got to win at the line and throw the ball down the field. And if he doesn't get open and make the play, then you find somebody else that can. But you've got to start looking at things and saying, hey, listen, we have got to do a better job of getting him in position to be successful. And then also, if you're going to be a team that's going to do more 12 personnel run the ball, then you need to get Bo Collins and Jaden Thomas on the field together more frequently. Because if you're going to do that, those are your 2 best blockers and those are your 2 most clutch receivers. I mean, they say, well, yeah, but they don't stretch the field. You're not throwing the ball down the field anyway when you're in 12 personnel. So what does it matter if you have stretch the field guys on there in 12 personnel anyway? I don't think that's necessarily the full-time answer, but you've got to be willing to deal with it. And then here's the flip side of it. I do believe that Mike Denbrock wants to be a coach that throws the ball more effectively. And honestly, they need to. I think the laziest thing that Notre Dame could do during this bye week is just say, you know what? We're just going to come out of this break and we're just going to play a lot more 12 personnel and just pound teams. I think that'd be a very disappointing, lazy answer that I would have to guess would probably be more head coach driven than it would be OC driven. Because if you're the OC, it's like, yeah, we're not where we need to be, but we just can't pack it in for the rest of the season. We're still developing as a football team, and it's not just about this year. It's also about getting things established for next year. So I really hope that we don't see that, Trevor. But here's the thing. You also have to be smart enough to say we are good at this, and we have to have a package to where if we're in a game when we're struggling running the football or throwing the football, that we have a package we can go to say, okay, it's not working right now. This is our be great at running the football package and then lean into it in a particular game. The other thing is there also needs to be a semblance of you need to think about how you're using your personnel correctly from that package standpoint. And you need to start doing more of you need to come up with a speed package. And every good passing team has this. Notre Dame needs to have this. And you've got to say, okay, we've got to figure out ways to say that on this particular drive, we're going to push the tempo and because a lot of what Notre Dame does is they're not getting the receivers involved in blocking a whole lot with a lot of stuff that they do. So get Jaden Harrison on the field at the same time as Chris Mitchell, and then either Jaden Greathouse, either inside or outside, or maybe it's KK Smith. I mean, I would love to see this. I would love to see KK Smith, Chris Mitchell, and Jaden Harrison out on a series together, just to not as your starters, but just to, hey, we're going to come out. We're up 7-0 on Stanford. Second drive, we're coming out. We're putting our speed package in the game, and we're going 11 personnel, or heck, even 20 personnel with those three receivers in Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. We're going to go tempo, and we're going to be aggressive. Aggressive with your screen game, aggressive with your down the field game, moving the pocket, all types of different things. I would say probably 11 personnel would be best to do that out of, because then you can have that extra pass pro option in there and just go at teams and say, hey, here's something for you. And then maybe the next series you start off in 12 personnel and you got Bo Collins and Jaden Thomas on the outside and you're going at them that way. Or you've got Jaden Greathouse and Bo Collins, or Jaden Greathouse and Jaden Thomas, where you start to mix up your personnel a little bit more to where when this group is on the field, they're presenting different problems for you as a defense that you have to prepare for. That, I think, could start to kind of play with teams a little bit mentally and say, hey, listen, in order to get here, we need to have some different wrinkles that we do. I think that's something else that this receiving offensive staff and the receivers coach needs to think about is, we need to figure it out. And when your receivers are struggling the way that they are, it's even less reason for me to say, if they're not playing well, then there's less excuse to have 14 and 17 sitting on the bench. Because I can say, hey, Cam, you know how to run fast? Yeah, that's the one thing I do not do, coach. All right, go run really fast. We're about to tell you to, you know what I mean? Like, it's to the point now where the way teams defend you, it's not hard to design some go balls. It's not. They're there. And you need to do a better job of winning at the line, which we'll talk about later, and then throwing those. But your personnel has to be considered at receiver. And it's, again, this isn't a bench this guy, bench that guy. It's, are you using them the right way? Are you using them in the right combinations? Are you using them in the right spots? And all of that needs to be part of what's addressed when you talk about the personnel of this offensive football team.
Well, and it also speaks to like just finding different ways to get the ball into the hands of the guys with speed. I'm not saying, I mean, you're 100% right that the go ball is absolutely there, especially with the way teams defend it now and with how fast Notre Dame players can be and have shown that they have been. But I think of, and I know you don't watch a whole lot of NFL, but I think of the different ways like the Chiefs have started to use Xavier Worthy, or how last year towards the end of the season and how the early parts of the season, the Detroit Lions found different ways to use Jamison Williams. Two guys who are like, they are just fast. That is their thing. They're not known for going up and mossing people, and they're not known for catching routes over across the middle of the field. Look for different ways similar to what Notre Dame did with Braden Lindsey when he was a freshman. He was fast, and they needed to get him the football. Think about running touch passes to him. Think about sending him in motion and kind of tossing it forward to him. Just anything to get the ball into the hands of the guys with the most speed on your team. Because that's what all we heard about in the preseason is how fast Notre Dame was and how And just, I mean, calling a spade here. It's
And
third
I
and
saw it.
7.
I mean, I'm watching with my own eyes. I'm
Yeah.
seeing it. I'm talking to defensive coaches and I'm talking to defensive players and different people. And they're like, dude, these guys are giving us problems. And then we get to Saturdays and it's like, now again, part of it is what we talked about in part 1, Trevor, is like, if you can't figure out the offense, it's hard to throw a bunch of deep balls when your quarterback's getting drilled on quick outs.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
when your quarterback is dropping, literally catching and throwing a speed out and he's getting drilled as he's throwing it. I don't know how well the all verts package is going to go.
Totally.
Right. That's also part of it.
Yeah. 100%.
You've got to figure out some ways to get these guys on the move more. You have to. It's way too static, way too stationary. You've got to get them moving. And I think the personnel packages can be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Drags, crossers, anything to get underneath linebackers chasing, because you have the speed to beat people around the outside. So there's a lot of different things that they can look at, short of, just to your point, an all verts package with the fastest players on your team. And I think once you ask your wide receiving core to go out and do those things, run drags and crossers and make plays in the open field and make guys miss one-on-one, then you can start looking at a personnel change if, like, they can't do that. You know what I'm saying? Because you have a very talented room in that I guarantee you Cam Williams or Micah Gilbert would go out and make plays like that if given the opportunity. So I think it's just, those are different things that you have to start looking into and doing, not just once every other game asking Chris Mitchell to run a deep post route. It's got to be something more than that, right? Because those drags and crossing plays on those 3rd and 6s, 3rd and 7s, and getting interior linebackers and safeties chasing a Chris Mitchell or a KK Smith, I think that gives you more of a chance to gain a first down than asking Mitchell Evans coming off of an ACL tear to make a guy miss in space on the short side of the field. There's different things that you can do to get the ball into the hands of your fast guys.
Next one, Trevor, we'll talk briefly about tight end. We talked a lot about that. They've got to find a way to get their tight ends going. Getting Colt Cooper Flanagan back will help a little bit because he's their best blocker by far, but they're going to have to find answers with Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridan. And Eli Raridan has also been a little disappointing, and they just don't use him at all in the pass game. And I don't know if they're not comfortable with him or what the issue is, but they're going to have to find some answers there. We'll talk more about how the tight ends can be used when we get into our pass game section. But we did spend a lot of time in the intro portion talking about the tight end, so we'll move on from them. Another one, Trevor, is the running back room. Now, this is a little bit different because a lot of the stuff that we've talked about has been sort of a negative. This isn't going well. This is the one where it's like, these are without question your two best playmakers outside your quarterback position, right? Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. You need, part of the bye week is like leaning into your strengths and how do we better build the offense around these two players? How can we more effectively put them in positions to go out there and have some wins? And one of the things that I would love to see this staff spend some time doing during the bye week is finding more ways to allow those two guys to be on the field at the same time. And that's a big one because there's a lot of stuff you can do in the run game. There's a lot of stuff you can do in the pass game to get those guys together. And then the other thing is, as much as they are emphasizing just downhill runs, they need to think hard about the potential of making Keidron Young more of a factor in the offense in some of your short yardage situations. I have a twofold thoughts on that. Number one is, if you have a 230-pound back with his feet and vision running some zone stuff with Riley Leonard, it makes it a little harder to key on Riley Leonard. Number two, if I am going to run some quarterback leads, I thought Jeremiah Love blocked his butt off on Saturday. I did. I thought he gave it as hard as he could have. I'd much rather have the 230-pound freshman that dragged an entire Purdue defense 10 yards lead blocking there than Jeremiah Love. And so, I mean, I would actually ramp up that role a little bit for him in some of the, short yardage, heavy personnel sets, because I think he can give you an aspect that can fit a little bit more effectively there. And then maybe when you talk about doing 20 personnel, I want to see a lot of stuff with Jeremiah and Jadarian doing some of that stuff. But there may be some times when I would want to get Keidron going too. So I love the role that Aeneas Williams has. I'm actually comfortable with that. I've said before, there needs to be a package, however, where you're okay getting on third down Jeremiah or Jadarian on the field even if it's just as a decoy, because teams are going to be looking for them. I understand that, but I do like the role that Aeneas has brought to the table. I mean, he's had 2 carries on third down. One he converted to 3rd and 8, and the other he almost popped to 3rd and 20 or 2nd and 20. Right? I mean, he 2nd and 30. He almost popped one, I should say. So I said 3rd down run, but he almost popped to 2nd and 30. And he's a pretty good blocker. And he's, but okay, now how do you evolve his role? There's some things you can do with him catching the football on 3rd down or in that package. So there's a lot of different things to consider, but you've got to do an even more effective job building around the running backs in the second half of the season beyond just the bulk ball carriers in this stuff. And then like the screen pass to Saturday, we saw them trying to get some swing stuff going. That's fine. Those are things to me that are a little bit easier for a defense to defend. Just kind of like wheel routes without any other motion, just straight free release, 11 personnel, trips, free release. Those, you can get bad teams with that. You're not going to get most teams with that. You got to do something where you've got something else going with some kind of jet, some kind of action, something like that gets them going. They're going to have to be more willing to find more ways to get these running backs to football in different ways. That's the key there, Trevor, and we can talk about that more here in the run and pass game section. Last thing for me, this one's probably going to be a little bit more controversial because some people are not going to like this. Riley Leonard, the way that this is going, I worry that Riley Leonard's going to be able to survive the entire season. And we have seen already that when he gets banged up and you have to limit the offense, it's not nearly as effective. So not only do you need to find some answers there, which we'll get into, but you need to reconsider, like, do we have the right backup quarterback? Because it is clear that right now, Steve Angeli's the backup quarterback. He is a great kid, great backup quarterback, but there's a chance if this keeps going that you're going to need someone to step in and say, you're the guy now because Riley's done. I hope we don't get to that point, but you just watch him get off the ground by the end of the last 2-3 games. He's worn out. And because of because think about it, is Riley's not just taking the 13 hits on the 13 carries he's had. He's getting hit every other passing play. He's getting knocked to the ground every other passing play. And then you throw the scrambles into the equation. It's going to be tough. I hope I'm wrong, but it's going to be tough there. This bye week needs to be a perfect time where they say 8 and 12, you guys are going to get your chance to get some extra work this week because you've got to ramp them up. And if you need somebody to come off the bench in the fourth quarter and get you out of a game, it's probably still Steve. But if you get to a point where Riley's going to be out 3 games, I think it's time to say, okay, who's the quarterback or he's out for the year. Who's the quarterback of the future? The reality is it's not 18. It's either 8 or 12 or both. And that's something that has to be considered, honestly. And then you get to the point where if they're comfortable enough and the offense just completely sputters and you drop a game or something like that, do you then say, okay, it's time to got to go a different direction? And that direction's not going to be Steve, in my opinion. I've not talked to anyone that has given me any thought at all that that's who they view as the future quarterback. It's everything that I've been told and everything I've heard and everything I've seen with my own eyes. It's 8 and 12. That's the future. It's Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr. That's the future quarterback. And it's time to ramp up those opportunities for them throughout the week of practice. And this bye week could be a great time for that. Does that mean the move is made now, or is it get them the extra work this week and then maybe make the full-time move in the next bye? Maybe that's it, but this bye week would be a great opportunity to see where they are. I don't know if I'm ready to make that change yet, but I want to see where they are. I would make sure that 8 and 12, and again, that's assuming CJ's healthy. It was weird Saturday at the game. He was only throwing with his left hand. I don't know if he had a finger thing or what the heck was going on. Hopefully he's healthy, but this might be a good week to get those kids a little bit of extra work as you get ready to go in the Stanford game. So that's the final personnel thing that I would consider for this team heading into the bye week.
It's like we talked about, Brian, all cards are on the table. And a lot of people think of the bye week as just only evaluating where the starters are at. But the bye week is a time in the middle of the season where you can look a little bit into the future, right? Because when you have a game week coming up, no coach is going to be like, well, how's 2025 going to look? What's that going to look like? How do we start prepping our team for that? Obviously, but the bye weeks are a good time to evaluate, hey, what steps can we take now as a coaching staff today this week to look at what some fits could look like for next season. I'm with you. I think it has to be you take a real hard look at 8 and 12. I've said it before, and I'm in agreement with you here too. So I'm not going to harp on it. But if Riley goes down and it's, to finish out a game, you put in 18, just based on experience. And he's a guy where you ask a backup quarterback to go in and run exactly what I tell you, and you make this read. And if not, you dump it off a running. And Steve is perfect for that. But one of the things that's plagued Notre Dame year in and year out and year over year is dynamic play at quarterback. And you have two guys in Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr that can come in and turn your offense around for multiple years and almost break the cycle a little bit of Notre Dame is a one and done quarterback school, and then they're on to the next kid. So definitely think you need to start taking a deep look into Kenny and CJ and where they're at developmentally, because maybe they just haven't gotten that opportunity. You can measure kids when they're running with scout team and running with the third team, but give them a couple looks with the second and the first team and just see where they're at to give you some sort of gauge to then start to reevaluate throughout the rest of the year.
So that's going to do it for the personnel part of the show. We're going to jump into some specifics of run game, pass game. That's going to be more, it'll be some personnel stuff, but more geared towards X's and O's, philosophy, things like that in the next section. So we'll get to you there. But before we do, folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And of course, of always, if you've not done so, go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. Also, our URL has changed for our Athlon site. So that's going to be a little bit different now. If you had that bookmarked before, by the end of the day, we'll have the redirect done. As a reminder, anytime you ever want to read our articles at Irish Breakdown and you're not on the message board, because we put them all on the message board, you can also just go to irishbreakdown.com, and then that'll take you to our site. So we'll have that integration updated by the end of the day. So just keep that in mind for people who have bookmarked the Irish Breakdown article page. That's there. If you're a board member, I've already made the change on the message board. So if you're a premium board member and you just go to ib.com and you see the home, it'll take you to the new page. So that'll be there now. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. You can find that. They've just got us. They've changed it used to be a little bit of a longer URL. Now it's a shorter URL. So it's going to look a little bit different. So just be prepared for that. And you'll find that, as I said, at irishbreakdown.com. So Trevor, part of looking at the bye week is, okay, what do you do well? And the one thing this team does well is they run the football. And they need to make sure that continues, because here's the thing. As you get better, as you get going, other teams know that that's your strength, and they're going to play to that. And I thought Louisville did a pretty good job of playing to that. And they did kind of what you and I talked about. They did some things that try to limit the perimeter run game, and they just expected their defensive line to dominate the Notre Dame offensive line, and that's pretty much what they did. And honestly, I didn't think Notre Dame did a whole lot schematically to try to put them in any binds. That is something that absolutely is going to have to change. Part of a smart coaching staff is saying, look, we're going to lean into what we're good at. And that doesn't mean coming out and saying, okay, we're just going to go 12 personnel and just run it down your throat all day. It's saying, look, we have explosive running backs and a dynamic quarterback. How can we play to that? Knowing that we're also down 3 starting offensive linemen. And so when I look at this Notre Dame offensive football team, Trevor, I think it's a situation where they're going to have to say, okay, we're an inside zone team. We're going to run counter. We're going to do, but we need to make sure that we are better. We are doing a better job of putting teams in binds with how we run the football. And there are several different ways they can do that. The first two, in my opinion, and we have seen them do this. So this isn't just me saying this is what I like to do. As Brian Driscoll, if I was the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame, this is what we do. This is, I've seen you do this. It's worked really well. This needs to just be who you are. Not it worked against Purdue, but this is who you are. And it's two things. It's you've got to push the tempo, and you've got to have way more pre and post snap movement when it comes to your run game. And I thought the Purdue game was brilliant in that regard. I thought they did a great job using motions to get leverage and all types of things. And then the last couple games, especially this last game, I thought they came out early with that quarterback counter look, which was new. It was a new wrinkle. It had success early. They've done some different counter wrinkles, Trevor, that have been effective. They went to more of a counter tray against Purdue that Purdue wasn't prepared for, and it worked like a charm. The quarterback counter they used this week, where they would either, depending on whether the center was uncovered or covered, it'd be the center with a pull kick, or it'd be the backside guard with the pull kick, and then the running back led around. And I thought Jeremiah Love, he was crashing into dudes on that particular play. I thought he did a really nice job with that. So props to Jeremiah for saying, hey, I'm not getting a rock. This is what you're asking me to do. I'm going to go do it, and I'm going to do it well. So it just kind of tells you what kind of player Jeremiah Love is. And a lot of times we think of big-time backs like him, you think they're divas, but when you look at Jeremiah, you're like, no, he doesn't have that diva personality, and he's pretty much been the kind of kid this year so far that's like, whatever you need me to do, coach, I'm going to do it. But at the end of the day, you've got to find ways to better generate space in your run game. And they did a really bad job generating space in the run game against Louisville. And they had very methodical, easy to kind of determine what was going to happen action by their tight ends in the motion game. It was very easy to look at Notre Dame and say, this is what's coming. Vince will tell you, like, I'm up in the box and I'm like, all right, they're doing this. Oh, they're about to do that. And I'm pretty much nailing it almost every time. And if I can figure that out, defensive coordinators are going to figure that out. So they're going to have to get back to where it's just every week we are working with tempo. And that works for your quarterback because your quarterback's not a guy that's a full field read guy. This allows it good for him. You're getting your calls in. He's getting his reads down. You're making quick reads. You're getting those shots, and you're putting teams on their heels. They're not able to get all their communication in, and then do more motions and shifts. They do some things that at times when they do motions, it's really effective. Literally every time this year they've done it, they've been effective. And so now it's like, and we've seen Mike Denbrock use motion a lot. He did that a lot at LSU. They need to get better at that week to week. And it's been very weird. Some weeks it's there and some weeks it's not. And then some weeks it's like they don't have it, but when they need a play, they do it. Like we saw with the slot fade to Jaden Harrison. That needs to be a normal part of who you are, Trevor. That's going to protect the run game in a big way. Because if you're doing more jets and different things, including out of your 20 and 21 personnel, I'm running a jet action to Jeremiah Love with an inside zone to Jarian Price. If the defense doesn't respect Jeremiah's jet action because they think they know we're going to run this, then guess what I'm doing next time? I'm freaking running a jet to Jeremiah Love. There's all types of different things you can do to get those two kids the ball more in ways that is going to put defenses in a much tougher bind. The more you do that, that makes it even harder to defend Riley. I hope that the game plan against Louisville was, we got to do whatever we got to do to win this game and then get into the bye. I'm okay with that. Now you're into the bye. It's self-scouting time. This is who we are. How can we get more effective at this? As early in the season, they were ripping off big runs because they were spreading the field and they were going tempo and they were making calls. As we've gotten deeper into the season, you're starting to see them get tighter and tighter and tighter with how they line up. And I think just going to 12 personnel, Marcus Freeman said this, and I think it's lazy. We're just going to have to probably do more 12 personnel and run it. No. Stay in your 11 personnel stuff. Spread the field. Force them out of the box. But then maybe instead of 11 personnel one snap, you're in 21 personnel the next snap, and you got Jeremiah Love out there. If you're running RPO bubble screens and RPO slants and RPO now screens to Jeremiah Love, that's going to force you to kind of respect that. And then you've got your inside zone stuff with Jadarian Price and Riley, or Keedron Young and Riley, or Aeneas Williams and Riley. And so those things to me, and then, of course, there's times when you've got Jeremiah at running back and you're doing a lot of that movement with, Chris Mitchell or KK Smith or Jaden Harrison or guys like that. You're now putting teams in some really funky binds. And, a lot of it's true in the pass game too, because this stuff all sets up your throwing game. When they've used motion to gain leverage advantages in the pass game, it's worked great. And there's a lot of more things they can do out of that. So pushing the tempo and doing more pre-snap to get teams thinking and moving is going to be huge for this offense, especially in the run game. That's should be priority number one when it comes to schematic adjustments and philosophical adjustments. Is we're really good at this. We need to do that a lot more often.
A lot more often. Consistency, I think, is a huge piece with the pre-snap motion specifically. I went back through and I did a deep dive on Notre Dame's first 3 offensive possessions, which were all touchdowns. Third one aided a little bit with that missed punt snap, and they got the ball on the 3-yard line. But still, nonetheless, every play of Notre Dame's first 3 offensive possessions, they ran some sort of motion. Every single play, whether it was sending the tight end in motion, whether it was motioning out Jeremiah Love to the slot and then motioning him back into the backfield, running a little jet motion in front of the quarterback with one of the wide receivers. But in some way, they incorporated that every single play of the first 3 drives, and all 3 led to touchdowns. They went away from it, not entirely, but it got significantly less consistent in the second and third quarter. They would still run it, but not as much as they would. Got a little lackadaisical, which also needs
slower.
addressing. Yeah,
it got a lot slower.
And once they did it with a sense of urgency in the fourth quarter, when they put points back up on the board again. So there is a clear pattern with what Mike Denbrock is going to be able to do with pre-snap motion.
Can I say one other thing, Trevor?
Yeah.
What was the one game this year where we saw them use that the most?
Motion the most?
Where it was just that movement and motions and tempo, we saw them use it the most. The answer's Purdue.
Yeah.
Now, again, I get Purdue's not good, but you still looked great. And when you've done it in other games, it's worked. So it's like you have clear evidence that your offense was rolling. Riley was comfortable. Your running backs were getting space. You've seen it work for the pass game, and then it's worked in other games too when you've done it. So you have a game where that was a prominent part of what you did for the whole game, and you ripped the team up. And again, I understand Purdue's not a real good football team, but Purdue's last 2 opponents were Power 5 teams, right? So Notre Dame scored how many points against Purdue?
66.
Right. They scored 66, right? Notre Dame's last 2 opponents are Oregon State and Nebraska. They have scored against Purdue 66 points combined. So, and Nebraska put 21 up in the second half. Yeah, okay, they're not good. Notre Dame had 8.3 yards per play against them. The 2 Power 5s they've played since, 5.9, 7.1. So Notre Dame did to them something significantly greater than what any other team has done. Notre Dame had almost as many yards rushing as Nebraska had in total offense against Purdue. So, yes, Purdue's not good, but they've given up 66 combined points in their other 3 games. 66. Notre Dame scored 66 themselves, 59 with their offense. Right? Yeah. So we have evidence that it worked, and we've also seen evidence in other games, like you mentioned against Louisville. You had 4 touchdown drives. On 3 of those drives, I felt Notre Dame did some really good things with how they moved the offense around, and then also went to push the tempo. Mm-hmm. It's like the deeper they get into the game, the slower they start to go. And that's something else that I look at. I'm like, I don't understand why you do that. And I'd like to see them kind of get back to doing a little bit more of that type of stuff and be more effective and be willing to adjust in game. Like, okay, so what we're doing now, let's they're reacting this way. Let's go do this. So I think that's something that could help out the run game a ton. Absolutely a ton. The other thing too, Trevor, when you talk about the run game is they've got to find ways to get the ball to the perimeter more with their running game. Because when I read this yesterday, and for those who didn't listen to the show last night, so I have the whole game broken down. I have down, distance, yard line, hash, personnel, formation, backfield alignment, motion, play, run pass, direction of the run pass, drop back, target, player, target position, result. Was it an efficient run, a blocking notes, and then 2 up? So like it's a lot, right? This is what they ran against, basically what they ran against Louisville. Quarterback counter, inside zone, quarterback kick, quarterback lead, inside zone, Q counter, inside zone, Q counter, inside zone, counter, and it was a running back counter. Inside zone, Q counter, quick pitch that went for 12 yards and almost popped. Inside zone, counter, inside zone, counter, quarterback lead, quarterback counter, inside zone, quarterback counter. They get the ball outside one time on a designed outside play. The only other time the ball got outside at all was Jadarian Price popping a zone play outside for 16 yards. And he's pretty good at that. But you can't, and the problem with that is you're running right into the teeth of Louisville's best part of their defense, which is right up the middle. And
Yeah.
you're asking your second string center and your second string right guard and your redshirt freshman left guard to dominate them and blow them off the ball. And they kind of soon figured out, like, hey, this is what they're doing. And so what Louisville started doing more of is kind of going too high. And then they just kind of started squeezing the box because they knew everything was going to so they were crashing the edge to force, keep that bounce from happening. And then they were just kind of collapsing on the box, and Notre Dame couldn't get anything going. And Notre Dame didn't do anything to kind of make them pay for that. And they're going to have to find some answers to do that. And that's whatever that is that buck sweep? Is that some sort of pin and pull type thing where the ball gets outside? Is it the kind of the quick pitch, which we saw Emil Wagner getting outside for? Is it, getting back to maybe, the jet sweeps that haven't been hugely impactful, but they've been impactful. I mean, Jeremiah Love had I think a 14-yard gain on that against Purdue. He had, I think, a 10-yard gain on that against Texas A&M, but it gives them something to think about. Because trust me, the next 7 opponents are going to look at number 4 and say, we need to always know where number 4 is. And you've gone away from that these last couple games, and it's just where number 4 is all the time now. And they need to get back to where you don't always know where number 4 is going to be. And when you see 4 and 24 on the field together, you kind of like, uh-oh, this isn't going to be good. So run game-wise, they're going to have to find ways to get the ball to the perimeter. And again, this isn't your bread and butter is counter and inside zone. Cool with that. No problem. No problem at all. But you've got to find ways to say, but you can't just crash the box because we're going to do some things to pop outside of you. And those are the big, like, this is what Harry Hiestand did a great job of in 2017. Notre Dame was a heavy inside zone team in 2017. I mean, they ran the mess out of inside zone. But they would run buck sweep and G scheme to really get you kind of like, okay, you want to start crashing inside? That's fine. We're just going to run buck sweep. And they had a 74-yard touchdown run on buck sweep against North Carolina. They had I think it was like a 59-yard run on a G scheme, off tackle G scheme against Miami of Ohio. I'm trying to think of the other game they had buck sweep, went for a big play. And those type of things would keep you honest. And if you just started crashing, then I've got, we may only run it once, but it's going to go. I remember the USC game in 2018 when USC was just crashing the run game. And they would basically kind of go, Notre Dame ran a lot of, the G scheme under Chip Long, right? So when Notre Dame would run their G scheme, it was basically both guards would pull. USC would crash their backers hard to that side. So Chip Long said, all right, cool. Our offense is sputtering a little bit. You guys are crashing this. So what he did was, it's a play you can run really once or twice in a game, and that's it. Sometimes only once. He had the guards pull to the right, and he just ran Dexter Williams by himself on the backside. And it went for a 50-plus yard touchdown, right? Like, that's saying, okay, you're going to do this. We're going to make you pay for it. And that's where Notre Dame is now. Teams are crashing this. They know this is that you can't beat us unless 13, 4, and 24 are running on us. If they're not, then you can't beat us. And they're going to play to that. And so it's not as simple as just, well, I guess we're going to have to throw the ball better. That's part of it. But the other part of it is, all right, cool. You can't defend us inside and out. You can't. We're too talented. And here's the other thing, too. The one thing that the Notre Dame receivers have done really well this year in every game that I can think of is block.
Yep.
That's why I saw. I don't buy the whole, well, they're not running routes hard because of an attitude, because they run too much. Like, I think part of it is they know they're not getting the ball if they're the second or third read. I don't like that. But this is a group, by and large, even like Chris Mitchell, who's like a $185 in pads, blocks his butt off. Bo Collins has been a great blocker so far. Jaden Thomas has been a great blocker so far. Jaden Greathouse fights his butt off in the run game. I'm not worried about that. That's even more reason for me to say some of this quick hitting perimeter stuff, you should be doing more, because you've got receivers that will actually try. And there's some things you can do off of that with some play action, where you can then create some play action plays where you get them flowing this way instead of just a pure downhill play act. Because here's the thing, just a downhill play action, the defense doesn't have to adjust at all, because they're coming this way to stop the run. They can just keep coming this way to get to the quarterback. But if you're running some stuff off a jet sweep action where the quarterback's faking and dropping back, defense is going this way, not this way. And those are some things that can maybe spring you for a big play. So these aren't things you run 50 times a game. These are wrinkles that you run to either A, keep teams honest, or B, if they do want to collapse to take away our zone encounters, then that we're going to catch them once or twice. And as we've seen in all 5 games, if you get Jeremiah or Jadarian in space on the second level, it's gone. Well, then what is it? What's the only thing teams are afraid of when they play Notre Dame? You can't let 4 and 24 get in space or it's over. And they're game planning to that. So you've got to then counter that. And that's what the bye week has to be about is every single week, what are ways that we can basically get their linebackers and safeties thinking and moving their eyes side to side as we're snapping the ball. And just a quick tight end zipper motion ain't going to get it done very often.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially when there's no wrinkles off of that. So there's just like the under screen from the tight end. You know what that'd be great off of an action where it's Jeremiah Love doing that and your tight end's down blocking because the safeties are going to see the tight end down blocking and they're going to think what? Inside zone. They're going to come down hard. Like there's so many things that you can be creative with and it's not hard. It's simple stuff. And you've got to do that to protect the run game. If they can get more creative with their movement and then find ways, and I don't mean shouldn't even say creative. It's not about creative. Buck sweep is not creative. Jet sweep is not creative. It's more diverse, and it's not even that much. Give me 6 you're going to run the ball 30 times a game. 5 or 6 of those need to be straight perimeter runs, outside runs. And I'm not talking about outside zone, which is an off tackle play. I'm talking about your job is to get the ball outside. That's the key. That's what you're trying to do. And if you do that, then you're good to go.
You have to find different things to incorporate into your run game, to your point, to keep the defense honest. You can't run the ball 37 times a game and all of it lives within the tackles. I think early in the season, Notre Dame was just relying on their outside run game. The bulk of the time was just Riley Leonard keeping and pulling backside. And defenses are starting to crowd the box more. Can't tell you how many times during the Louisville game I would sit there and count. There's just 8 people hanging out in the box. I don't care how good execution is. I don't care. When you're outmanned, you're outmanned. Most of the time. Because Notre Dame isn't giving you any reason to think outside of the hashes. And so if you start scheming things differently, to your point, not more creative. They don't have to start running double reverses. Nothing crazy. Just anything schemed to get your guys to the outside. Because in all of those plays, in Jadarian's big run against Purdue at the end of the half, bounces it to the outside. In Jeremiah Love's first touchdown run against Purdue, bounced it to the outside and beat a linebacker who had the initial angle on him. Jeremiah Love is just significantly faster than I would make the argument most, if not all, linebackers in the country. So got to do things to find different ways to get your players to the perimeter because wide receivers own the big play. They've done a really good job blocking downfield this season and just not running into the teeth of the defense. Right now, if there was one word that I could use, especially the last couple of weeks, to sum up Notre Dame's run game, it's extremely predictable. And you confirm that by rattling off their diverse, if not lack thereof, of the play calling choices in the run game. And I'm not saying go away from it. I'm not saying now it needs to be a 50-50 split between buck sweep and inside zone. Just anything to keep the defense honest. Because if I'm a defensive coordinator game planning against Notre Dame, their pass pro can't hold up long enough for Riley Leonard to sit back and pick me apart if I do have 8 people in the box. And there is a 99.8% chance that they're going to be running inside zone. So anything that you can do to diversify your run game, because that's going to open it up. If you are going to stick true to being, we are a run heavy team, we are a run first team, which is fine, but you have to play into that strength and do things to mitigate the risk of, well, it's either I run inside zone to 4-24 to the left, or I run QB counter to the right. And that's it. That is what we are doing for the run game scheme on Saturday. Anything that mitigates that risk. Because it's going to keep people healthy longer. It's going to mitigate how many hits Riley Leonard is taking throughout the season. So we'll see what they decide to do during this bye week. But it is imperative that is one thing that they look at. If they are going to hold fast to being a run-heavy team, find different ways to be successful in that. Not just we're going to keep running the same plays and demand better execution.
That's right. Just a quick heads up, guys. I am aware that Scrap Richardson just committed to Notre Dame. So I was not expecting him to do that today. I thought that was going to be later in the week. So I'll have a video on that later tonight. I'll do something on that, and then I'll get an article ready here pretty soon. But flipped him from South Florida. Here's the deal. Do you know the other school that was really pushing hard to get him? Bama. So they beat Bama for him. Bama was pushing hard to get him as well. They also offered recently, and he's visited Bama. So this is a big win for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But we were not anticipating him doing that today. I thought that was going to be later in the week. So we will get to that. We'll have plenty to have some articles and breakdowns, and I'll get a video on that up later. So I just want to make sure you guys know we're aware of that, and we'll talk about that in a later video. Couple other things, Trevor, that we talked about is they need to. We talked about the perimeter. I think using ways to get Love and Price in the field together, possibly getting a little bit of a different package with Keedron Young, maybe getting him ramped up a little bit with your inside run stuff. The other thing too is Notre Dame is going to have a package in every single game that they go to when Riley Leonard can't run. We've now seen it in 2 games where Riley Leonard got a little bit banged up and it kind of limited some part of your offense, right? And in one game in particular, you just couldn't run him at all. And that was a Northern Illinois game. You've got to have a package. And look, coaches have those big play sheets, right? And in every play sheet that I've ever done, that I've been in charge of primarily putting the plan together, and that's for a few of my years, whether it's as an offense as a whole or pass game, you always have if crap happens, this is what we're going to. And when you've got a Riley Leonard can't run anymore situation, you've got to have something to where you can say, this is what we're going to do. This is the package we go to. This is the stuff we do, because you can't just say, hey, listen, we're just going to keep running the stuff we're running. We're just going to take Riley's runs out of it, because Riley running the ball is the complement in a lot of ways to the other running backs. And so when Riley hasn't been full strength, the offense has sputtered this season, and you can't have that. They're going to have to adjust that as they get into this this kind of last stretch of the season, where if Riley Leonard's banged up or they're keying on him big time or he's out, you've got to still be able to run the football. And that's going to require a little bit of a different package. Now, I'll say this. If you incorporate a lot of the things that we discussed earlier, that fixes a lot of that, to be honest with you. But when half of your runs are quarterback-designed runs and you lose that, you need to be able to do more than just run inside zone every play. And so I think some of those things will impact that, but you're going to have to also have a no Riley run game answer if that happens, Trevor.
Yeah, I think short answer is running 21 personnel and getting 4 and 24 on the field at the same time. One of the things that has made Riley Leonard such a threat in the run game is defenses have to game plan for 2 different guys with big playmaking ability. So how do you counter that? If Riley Leonard gets hurt, we saw it against Louisville. If he gets hurt, the run game just completely shuts down. Now, part of the factor is Riley Leonard is your leading rusher in terms of yards and I think attempts and touchdowns. Not yards per carry, but I think there's only like a 0.2 difference between him and Jeremiah, I think.
Yeah, just to give you those numbers, Trevor, Riley is barely the team's leading rusher. He has got 374 yards. Jeremiah has 373.
Yep.
Jeremiah is at 6.54 yards per carry. Riley 6.34 yards per carry. If you remove sacks, then he still is your leading rusher on a per carry basis either. Also, and then Riley has 7 touchdowns rushing. Jeremiah has 5. And oh, by the way, the team leader in yards per carry is Jadarian Price at 7.3.
Sure is.
So that's,
and
you got 3 dudes.
Mm-hmm. And you got to find different ways to get all of them the football. And so if Riley Leonard can't go on the ground, you still have to put the defense in a bind and find different ways where they still have to schematically game plan for 2 people that can bust it wide open. It's going to look a little different. I'm not saying go run the Wildcat and put Jeremiah at quarterback. No, nothing like that. But Jeremiah Love has shown and showcased the ability that he can line up in the slot. That's when motion starts coming into play. That's when tempo starts coming into play. Anything to get your opposing defense thinking they still have to game plan for multiple people. And if it is a situation like it was against Louisville, Riley Leonard did start running the ball again in the 4th quarter. So I think to end the game, he ran the ball 5 straight times, I think.
But not
So,
overly effectively,
right.
right? Because you had no other counters to that. Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. So if a situation does come up like that again, where Riley Leonard's banged up, he's essentially a non-factor in the running game in the second and third quarter, look to start incorporating 4 and 24 on the field at the same time, or get Aeneas in there, like on a third down situation. If you don't want Jeremiah Love taking that shot in the backfield in pass pro, I 100% hear that. But defenses are now aware that, when number 4 is on the field, they know where he's at all times. Get good at using your playmakers when they're not involved in the actual game plan, like on that specific play. So a lot of different things that they can start doing. Something that Mike Denbrock and company is going to have to figure out during the bye week of what is the most effective and the most efficient way to do that. But for me, I think short answer to that, if there is a package for when Riley Leonard's hurt, it's to run 21 personnel and put in, if it's a short down and distance, put in a Kedron Young and a Jadarian Price. Look to getting your running backs, arguably your deepest room on offense. Get as many of those guys on the field at the same time as possible if Riley Leonard's not able to affect the run game. 100%.
So that's going to do it for the run game breakdown, Trevor. We're going to move on to the pass game here next. But before we do, folks, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And of course, as always, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Trevor, let's get into the pass game. And obviously, this is the part of the offensive structure that needs the most help.
Yeah.
This has been the issue that's held the offense back. In big picture, just not getting into finer, just bigger picture, for whatever reason, the pass game has struggled. And it's been, it's like the quarterback gets the blame for it. And there's certainly plenty of reasons why he is part of the reason the pass game's not working. But there are a lot of issues going on, and you can't fix them all, but you got to fix some. And the first one is going to be this, and it's gotten progressively worse. But the offensive line pass protection was a major problem on Saturday. And it's not even just about personnel. We talked about personnel. The concern I had is you're having way too many blown protections with this offensive line, where just a simple slide protection doesn't get executed correctly. You still have no ability to pick up line games, essentially, in pass pro. And especially long twists, they have no ability to pick up. And so they're going 3-on-3, and Notre Dame can't get it to anybody because the center's just fully turning into it, and the guy loops around, and there's nobody there to pick it up. And so there are some coaching issues that need to be had right now. And on top of, okay, do we have the right people on the field? The next biggest thing that Mike Denbrock needs to sit down and shut the door behind him in Joe Rudolph's office is freaking fix the pass protection issues. I understand if Rocco gets beat on a play because the other guy's better, it is what it is. You got a quarterback that can make that guy miss. If Pat Coogan gets beat on a play, if Anthony Knapp gets beat on a play, yeah, it sucks. You live with it. But when that's compounded by the fact that your guys don't even know who to block half the time, that's going to kill an offense. And we've seen early in the season, it wasn't as bad because teams didn't know quite how to go at the protections yet. And the guy would lose a block, and Riley could make that guy miss, and he'd take off running and then go make a play. But right now what's happening is you're getting run-throughs and the whole push, and it's just the whole thing is a mess. And the pass protection overall against Louisville, I thought, was a major problem. And again, when it was tight ends, there's a couple running back ones that weren't great. They were I thought for the most part solid. Tight end pass pro was a mess to where they just wouldn't touch guys sometimes. Your offensive line's allowing run-throughs. I don't care if Riley Leonard, if Riley Leonard woke up tomorrow like John Travolta's character in Phenomenon and could read a defense like he was, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning combined into one quarterback, he's still not going to have a great pass offense if he can't freaking protect them. You know what I mean? So that's priority number one, because all the other stuff we're going to talk about, Trevor, is irrelevant if this team can't pass block. And it's the combination of players getting beat and just the execution of the protection schemes. It's a major problem right now. And that's got to get fixed. That is, if nothing else gets fixed during this bye week, and you can say, hey, we only got time to fix one thing, freaking fix the protection schemes and the technique that goes into that. Because if you can give your quarterback more time to throw, this offense will get better. Not astronomically better. No one's going to confuse them for 2019 LSU, but it'll get better. There was 3 or 4 plays on Saturday where I saw Riley's eyes go right to where the ball needed to go, but he either had to immediately scramble or he was getting hit as he was letting loose of the football. That can't keep happening. They don't throw enough for him to take that many hits. It'd be one thing if throwing 50 times a game and he's getting hit 5-6 times. They're throwing 25 pass plays and he's getting hit 6 or 7 times. That cannot happen. That's got to get fixed right now.
And I think Riley Leonard's athleticism is helping out statistically the offensive line. I went and looked earlier today. I don't know how many dropbacks he did. I'm doing this based on the minimum amount of pass attempts that Riley Leonard has had so far this year. He's had 126 pass attempts. He's been sacked 5 times. Mm-hmm. Steve Angeli has had 11 pass attempts and gotten sacked 3 times. So Riley Leonard's playmaking ability in the backfield, and mind you, that's off of a minimum. That doesn't account for how many dropbacks Riley Leonard's had where he scrambled and made a play and picked up yards on the ground. So at a minimum, 126 dropbacks. He's only been sacked 5 times. So we've said it before, and I'm going to say it again because I'm a firm believer that success in the passing game begins up front. You don't see a whole lot of air raid offenses have a lot of success with their quarterback getting hit 5 times every drive, right? One of the biggest issues with Riley Leonard is he rushes through his reads. You want to know why? Because he has to most of the time. He has to rush through his reads to try to get everybody looks. There are receivers that come open late. Or, I mean, arguably, they come open on time the way that the play was designed to. Riley Leonard's just not able to get the ball out. I'm not saying that Riley Leonard would have Heisman number, Jalen Milroe passing stats right now if the offensive line was playing better. But they are a major factor because it all starts up front. You can't go through a read progression when mentally you're just so rushed. You're not going to see things clearly. Deeper developing routes. I know we're going to start talking about attacking the middle of the field and getting tight ends involved. It's really hard to get tight ends involved. It's stuff in the seams and across the middle of the field on deep in routes when you don't have the time to make those throws. So needs addressed at all levels. Running backs, to your point, I don't think did a horrible job. I thought they were pretty good on Saturday. If you're going to get tight ends involved in pass pro, make sure they at least touch somebody. Right? Like, let's make sure that if you are not sending out an athletic tight end into a route scheme, make sure that they're blocking somebody, because there were multiple plays on Saturday where tight ends, guards, tackles, like nobody was being touched. The only person that was being touched was Riley Leonard in the backfield. It's okay if your right guard whiffs on something once in a while, or if your left tackle misses a block on a certain down, but the issue right now up front is it's all happening at once. That's the issue. Is it's not like, oh, well, this play, this guy missed, this play, this guy missed. On multiple plays, multiple guys are not picking up protection, which I don't know if Riley's not checking to the right thing for slide protections. I don't know what it is. One thing that is evident that you've touched on, Notre Dame's offensive line can't pick up line games. They're not great at picking up blitzes when additional guys are coming into the box. They're going to have to sit down and dissect how to keep 13 protected in the backfield, or this is going to be a short season for him, whether you continue to run him 14 times a game or not. I hold my breath almost every time Riley Leonard drops back to pass because they just get pushed back so much, and I'm just waiting for him to get rolled up on that bad ankle. I'm waiting for a bad hit, and I don't want that to happen in the slightest, obviously, but it's one of those things where the way the pass protection is right now is just not sustainable in the slightest. You got to find ways to keep 13 protected, not only from an injury standpoint, but if you want to start making a run into the playoffs, it is obvious that Notre Dame's passing game is going to have to open up in some capacity. Riley Leonard is just not going to be the guy that's going to go and throw for 350 yards a game. Hate to break it to you. Would I love to see that? Sure, but we've said it that Riley Leonard is a guy where you just kind of look at total yards.
Yeah, and not before. I mean, not this version. I mean, we've seen Riley Leonard have multiple 300-yard games in the past, but for whatever reason, it's just he hasn't shown it on this team. I mean, it's just like he hasn't had a 200-yard game yet, right? To your point, like, do I think he's capable of hitting some 300-yard games? Yeah, but we just haven't seen that. So right now, it's like, hey, can you get to if this? Like, think about this: if Notre Dame can just start throwing for about 215 to 25 yards a game, this offense is going to be crazy good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like I'm so frustrated with it.
I think
with it.
I am too, man. I think that magical number is starting to look into that 220 range with how dynamic the playmakers are from a running back standpoint for Notre Dame and how dynamic Riley is with his legs. I think once you get into that 220 range, because like if you go back and look, Notre Dame has had multiple opportunities to get to that number, right? Like there have been some missed. I mean, Riley Leonard would have had well over 200 yards passing in the Miami of Ohio game if literally just 2 of those DPI calls were not called and like they were catches. Now I know it's easy. You could say that for a lot of things, but I do think that's the number that you start to look at. Like Riley Leonard starts to creep closer to that 200 mark. If, in the Northern Illinois game, maybe Jaden Greathouse does come down with that. Or, there's a lot of different things that factor into it. But I think that 220 mark is going to be a good gauge. But for Riley Leonard, he is a guy that more than a pocket pass, you have to look at total yardage, not just what he's done through the air. But nonetheless, Notre Dame is going to have to open up the passing game to make a push into the playoffs once they get there, because fact of the matter is you're not going to go beat in Ohio State throwing for 150 yards. You're not going to beat in Alabama throwing because
you're not going to run all over them. You're just not.
No.
Unless your defense gets you 3 touchdowns, it's just not like, and I mean 3 touchdowns, like, they give you the ball to 15 and you know what I mean? Right. Like, that's what I mean. It's just, no. You could maybe beat the next 7 teams in your schedule, 6 and 7 teams in your schedule that way, maybe. But it's just not sustainable. I mean, because here's the thing, if your defense has a bad game again, it's just not sustainable. This can't continue. Can't continue. So we'll see if it changes or not. I mean, at this point in time, I'm not super optimistic that's going to change. But I'm hopeful that it will. I really am hopeful that it'll change.
I am too. Riley Leonard has shown steps of progress.
It's not so much the quarterback that I'm concerned about, to be completely honest with you. And I mean, if you look at the Miami of Ohio game, like I said, we talked about the different things we saw in that game, and even the Louisville game. It's just like there's opportunities there. You can't protect it. And then there are some things that I think, and this is the kind of the next thing we'll get into, Trevor. There are some things I think they need to do when you talk about the pass game that need to do better. I think the movement we talked about is going to be good for the pass game. Guys aren't winning great off the line. They got to do a better job there. More movement reduces the number of times they've got to do that. I think there's things they need to do a better job of when it comes to, doing more things where the receivers have to switch, and there's different ways to do that. There's the post-snap switch stuff, which we've seen. There's things that were effective with the pivot route and the slot fade behind it or corner behind it. But then there's other things with high lows, where maybe you run your tight end on a 12-yard in cut and you bring your number 2 on a shallow cross behind it and then bang a post behind it. Give me some kind of levels and, where you're forcing teams into kind of make everything right now is just so much a guy horizontal stretch. There's not a lot of stuff where you're pressing teams this way. And I think that's something too that can help the receivers as well. And so, get a little bit more creative out of your bunch stuff like Louisville did. That's what I said. Like if I was talking to the Notre Dame stuff, say, guys, watch some of the Louisville stuff because they do things out of formations that you guys run a lot out of that you basically just do a couple quick little meshy type of things out of. And that didn't even work on Saturday because Bo was rushing his route. That's what hurt him on. So he was not selling the pivot like Jaden Thomas did against Purdue. And teams have seen that now. Like certain things you can't keep running over and over again because teams have an answer for it. And so there's just things along those lines that you've got to be able to start stressing teams in different ways that also give your quarterback more easier throw options if the pressure comes. It's harder to complete a throw against pressure outside than it is I'm throwing right behind it. That linebacker's coming at me, I'm throwing a little crosser right behind it, little option right behind it, little snag right behind it. Some of those things need to be brought back, in my opinion. And if they can do that, then I do believe that they can get this pass game going to where it can be more efficient and more explosive. And, like maybe you don't need 25 passes to get to 225 yards. Maybe you only need 15. You go 11 for 15, hit a couple big plays, and then boom, there you are. You're complimenting it. Like, and because, Riley Leonard's not Brandon Wimbush. Brandon Wimbush wasn't completing multiple games of 65% throwing the football. But part of that was because Brandon threw a lot more down the field. That's going to bring your completion percentage down. So you've got to do some different things, Trevor, with your pre-snap movement, your post-snap switches, creating more vertical stretches to complement your horizontal stretches. Like, there's just different things that they're going to have to do in order to create different types of stressors on defenses. Yeah. Mike Denbrock ran a lot of crossing routes at LSU. And that's something that I'd like to see them bring back. And I know that, you don't have – Malik, but that's not a route that's dependent upon Malik Neighbors to be effective. You know what I mean? Like, I'm looking at their offense, Trevor, and I'm like, boy, they did a lot of things where, they were really effective hitting those crossing routes. And that's something that I think they can do a pretty good job of. I'm actually looking at it now. And I mean, they completed, 42-yard gain, 22-yard gain, 21-yard gain, 23-yard gain. And those things, then all of a sudden you start hitting some of those, and now all of a sudden you're running crossers with some ends behind it. And all of a sudden, they're crashing those crossers and you're banging the end cuts behind it. I mean, there's all types of things that then it complements, and we're just not seeing that. And those are things that Jaden Greathouse and Chris Mitchell and KK Smith and Jeremiah Love. Yeah, you're running Jeremiah Love on some slot fade stuff. Cool. Do more of that. But how about getting him on an under route when you've got clear outs by number, go with a more of like a reduced twins look, right? Let's just say you're going to do this we talked about 21 personnel. Okay. Put Mitchell Evans backside like you've done. You've got your two receivers play side. You motion Jeremiah outside of the sort of the reduced twins. And now all of a sudden he's number one in the 3x1. And maybe they run some type of vertical concept and Jeremiah's running your crosser, or they run a lot of snag stuff. So, maybe have Jeremiah run the snag, or Jeremiah run the slide, which opens up Chris Mitchell on the slide or on the snag. There's all types of stuff that's within what I know this offense does. Nothing I've proposed so far is from the Brian Driscoll playbook. It's not. I haven't cracked that open in forever. This is all, I'm being sarcastic with that. This is all stuff that I have seen Mike Denbrock's offense do either at Notre Dame or at LSU or at Cincinnati that I know can be incorporated into what they're doing now. Sure. And it's going to give you some wrinkles that number one, get your guys running, that get your guys cleaner releases, but also things that can better attack the way people are bringing pressures to stop your run game and your quarterback. And so all those things are routes that I need to see more of. I think Notre Dame's only hit like a couple crossers this year. I mean, gosh, I watched Jaden Thomas last year against Oregon State catch a crossing route and go for 20-some yards, because as aggressive as teams are downhill, eventually they're going to turn a crosser loose. And Notre Dame's got some guys can make them pay for it. So those type of adjustments have to be brought into the offense. They just do. You need to be able to bring some of that stuff into what you're doing to really get this thing going. And it also gives Riley Leonard some very easy reads. And those are easier throws to make when you're getting drilled, to be honest with you also. And if you catch a couple crossers behind the blitzing linebacker, that team starts thinking twice about how often they want to bring that linebacker. Or they bring the linebacker and then bring the safety down, and all of a sudden that climb route gets over top of it, or that post route gets over top of it, or things along those lines. So there just needs to be a little bit more. And this isn't even about being creative. This isn't even about, hey, if you do this, I'm not talking about adding 35 new pass concepts to your offense. I'm talking about like 3 or 4 And this, as you use them as complements to what you're already doing, it gets a little bit harder, because I just feel like this is a really easy pass offense to defend right now, schematically, because it's all horizontal stretch. It's all kind of slow developing stuff. There's really nothing that puts teams in binds, and that makes it easier to defend the slot fade because they don't have a lot of other things to go at.
Right.
And that's something that Notre Dame is going to have to adjust. There's going to have to be some schematic wrinkles they put in that put teams in binds, in my opinion, Trevor.
You're going to have to use a lot of pre-snap motion and post-snap switches to find ways to get your guys the ball early in like the play progression, to give them an opportunity to get yards after the catch. I feel like that is one thing that Notre Dame has not done a great job of so far this year, outside of, all right, we'll throw a quick screen here. We'll throw a tunnel screen and then go make a play. Yes, not really. But again, we've said it a lot, so I'm not going to beat the drum too much, but crossers, drag routes, anything to get those underneath guys chasing. Get your guys in space with speed. We've seen Jaden Greathouse break tackles before. He's a bigger bodied receiver. He can get yards after the catch. Heard nothing but great things about the speed of Chris Mitchell and KK Smith. Get those guys on an underneath crosser and give them the ability to. You want to talk about a really efficient way to get Riley Leonard over 200 yards passing. Let him throw a 5-yard dump off pass that goes for 25 yards. So to your point about just all these vertical routes going downfield, yes, in theory, it's nice, especially if they start breaking these things open, assuming pass protection holds up to bang plays over top. But a lot of the issues that I've seen with Notre Dame is, they're running 8-yard curl routes at the stick, and it's just an 8-yard reception. Like it's hard to turn curls into big plays, just based on how the route is designed. You're asking a wide receiver to try to make a play with somebody on his back, break a tackle that way. It's, so I think doing things to get the ball into your playmakers' hands early in the play progression, give them an opportunity to go. And again, it's hard when you do that when you don't attack the middle of the field. It's hard to ask them to do that when it's a lot of quick dump off stuff to the boundary side of the field, to a tight end, or it's to the sideline. So a lot of different things that they could do. So again, great time to evaluate it in the bye week. Start playing into the strengths of your team, scheme different things up. Because Bryan, to your point, it's not like crossing routes is a new concept to Mike Denbrock. That's, what I mean? So, I think you hit the nail on the head. Crossing routes are not specific to Malik Neighbors, So there are a lot of things that he can do to start opening up this offense. And I think that will, satisfy a little bit of the fans too, to look at a stat sheet and see like, oh, Riley Leonard had 237 yards passing today. And then you go watch the replay of the game, and it's because 5 or 6 receivers throughout the game broke it loose for 20, 30-yard chunks,
Yeah. Last thing, we talked about levels. I think that also attacks the middle of the field more. And right now, Notre Dame does very little attacking the middle of the field throwing football. And right now, teams, when they see pass, they just go like this. And, and that's what opened up a couple things against Miami of Ohio, because you hit some of those backside in-breaking routes. You had a couple digs. So, like, those worked for you, and then they were gone this week, partly because, again, you don't have time to throw the football. But I would like to see that. The final thing for me is, and this is where Mike Brown is gonna have to make his biggest impact during the bye week. Your receivers are not winning at the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing way too much just free releasing, and receivers who think this is 7-on-7, where just doing a little delay and go is going to win against a Division I cornerback, and it's not. And I think of, and I've showed this. I'm actually going to, I might do a video breakdown of this when I'm talking about on the message board, but I think of a couple times where they've had, and actually I did break this down in the Purdue pass game video. I talked about this with Jeremiah Love, where he's matched up against a 250-pound linebacker, and all he did was kind of delay and then run outside, and the guy's defending the inside, and he just runs with him. And, he's trying to take your inside away for a reason. Do something, attack it, give him a move that freezes him, and then outrun him. Jaden Harrison, same thing. The incompletion against Miami of Ohio was not Jaden Harrison's fault. Riley Leonard needs to throw a better ball. But Jaden Harrison still needs to do a better job winning there, because you're not just going to outrun better DBs like you did a kid from Miami of Ohio, right? And you could give yourself more separation by running a better route. where, and again, some things that Notre Dame can do to help with that is, run some routes where you kind of show that delay, like you're going to run a slot fade and then boom, come underneath, or run that route. And then you bring a quick under route, some kind of slant behind it from the outside. So instead of a hitch, maybe you run a reverse pivot and a quick under, a slant underneath that as a wrinkle to say, y'all just can't keep playing this route the way you're playing this route. So that's something too. But this is a coaching thing, in my opinion, because it's happening everywhere. Everyone's having this issue. They're doing a really subpar job winning at the line with their feet and hands, and they're doing a pretty bad job against reroutes. They're either going way inside or way around, or they're getting knocked off course. And things you can do to help that is to press the leverage more, use your hand. I mean, there's a lot of coaching things that I know you can do because I've coached it and I see good teams do it that are going to allow them to win more. That's a big part of this too, Trevor, is even if the pass game doesn't improve or doesn't change at all schematically, if you run it better from a technical standpoint, then you're going to be more effective. And there's been 2 or 3 times where they've had a slot fade matchup and it's drawn up exactly how you want it, but they just kind of run outside. Malik Neighbors can get away with that because he's running a 4-3. It doesn't matter that you know where he's going because he's going to outrun you. These receivers can't do that. They've got to sell that route more and do something to try to win. And then same thing with like Bo Collins. There's been a couple deep balls where he just kind of stutter and goes. There's no kind of sell the inside move, get that guy threatened inside at all, and then just release, and then you're wondering why the guy's running with you. Like you got to win more, and that's something that Coach Brown's going to have to work a lot on during the bye week because that is that is the one thing that is most correctable during the bye week. Of all the things we talked about from a coaching standpoint, besides, that's the easiest thing to do for the receivers is to work on that and then keep working on it every day as you go into the season, and eventually they're going to figure it out. But that's something that, like that little stutter move, that little stab and go that they can do, Trevor, that can be done literally this week. By the time you get to Stanford, they're able to run that, and Stanford's going to have some problems covering slot fade. I mean, it's your bread and butter play. You have to execute it more technically sound. So as much as I, had high expectations for Mike Brown, 5 games is a little too early to have too harsh of opinion on a first-year coach.
Sure.
But this is the kind of thing he can do to either put my concerns to rest or they grow, is like, look, we got to the bye week. We're not doing some things that I'm teaching, so we're going to harp on it this week and get better at it. That's what good coaches do. They say, hey, look, there's been periods of time where my guys aren't playing sharp fundamentally, and then you got to say, okay, we're not doing this well. Let's work on it, get better at it, and then it's something I'm going to emphasize. And that's why I want to see from him at this point in time is, hey, look, let's go out here. Let's be better winning off the line. Because you're not Malik Neighbors, because you're not Brian Thomas, you have to do the little things better. And Jaden Harrison, man, you're a 4-3 guy. If you win here and you get a step on this guy, you're catching this slot fade, you're going to the house. Like the slot fade he caught against Purdue. Yeah, it was a good catch, good ball. Give me a little bit better off the line, and maybe you're catching that sucker on the run and you're housing it. Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And that's something that has to get better and has to get better right now with this part of the offense, Trevor. That's the final piece for me, man. If you can get better here, that's going to help you. It's like little things. Get better here. Incorporate a more movement to where you're not having to win as often because the motion, the alignment, the bunch, the zip, the across field motion, all these different things are they're getting you free releases. So now I don't have to win 17 times against this outside guy. I only need to win 6. Just little adjustments and things like that that you can do, just a little bit more levels, couple crossers, using motion to get the ball. These are relatively simple fixes that take some work to get down, but if they can make these fixes, Trevor, the run game gets better, the pass game gets better, and this offense takes off. It's possible. We've seen it done before where an offense kind of comes out early and they're okay, and then they kind of explode and get better. But it's not just, hey, let's keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully we'll figure it out. It's like, okay, some things we got to keep doing, but man, we got to figure out how can we do a better job of playing better fundamental football, but then also do a better job of putting our players in position to be successful. That's what the coaches need to be doing this week. And if you're players, you need to be looking in the mirror saying, what can I do to be the best player I'm capable of being? And if I don't get the ball, it's not going to be because I didn't give you great effort. And if you're the coaches, hey, look, if you're not going to give me better effort, then I'm gonna go over here and I'm sure Cam Williams will want to give me better effort. I'm sure, Jack Larson will want to give me better effort. I'm sure that Kevin Bauman would love to give me better effort. I'm sure that Micah Gilbert's going to want to give me better effort. I'm sure that KK Smith will want to give me better effort if that means they're going to get on the field. So, same thing with Gerby Lambert. I mean, you go any position on, look, if Riley Leonard's half button it through practice or a game and has a bad attitude, I'm sure CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie, it's true of every player on the team. This isn't trying to call out specific players, but if this team just gave better effort, play with more urgency, and the coaches just make some minor adjustments, this offense is going to get a lot better, Trevor. And this bye week has to be the time for that. I'm going to be so disappointed if we come out against Stanford and just see the same old, and then the same thing the next week against Georgia Tech. If we just see the same old, or if we only see changes for one game and then they go back to the previous way before. I just don't want to see any of that stuff. I want to see this say, okay, we're gonna make these adjustments and we're gonna lean into what we know we're good at and really build around that and make sure that we're taking a lot of pride in our craft at various positions. And if this team can do that, and this has been an issue at Notre Dame for years, this isn't new to this staff. I just was hoping this staff would be able to fix it. It's just there's just not enough of an emphasis on, do you take pride in your craft? And that refers to the technical part of how you play the game. And the little parts of, this is the difference between me beating you off the line or not. And those are things that I need to see a better job of.
I agree. I think that's one of the bigger frustrating parts for me is Notre Dame does have a very athletic team. But once you get to this level and once you start playing this level of football, it's not good enough anymore to just be more athletic, especially once you start playing the upper echelon of college football, right? You have to do the fundamentals and the small things correctly. Bringing up your point about winning at the line of scrimmage, there's a lot of people that think that, oh, if you're a better wide receiver, you'll just start winning downfield on the route. It's like, that's not the case. I mean, you want to look at some of the best wide receivers that have ever played this game. They're amazing off the line of scrimmage. Like, people are blown away to hear that Devontae Adams is not a 4.3 guy. Devontae Adams is like a 4.6 guy, but he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL off the line of scrimmage. He was that way in college as well. And that's where he makes his living. It's about winning in the first 5 yards of your route, not what you do 10, 15 yards down the field. Set yourself up for success. I'm with you 100%. Overarching for the offense, I will say, I don't think Notre Dame's offense is far away. I think this conversation's a lot different if, one, they lose to Louisville, if the offense is just not making any sort of improvements. And in some areas they have. I think the frustrating thing for myself even is it's not as simple as pointing. It's like this one guy or these two guys are the issue or this one coach is the issue. There are a lot of things that the team has to get fixed, but I don't think they're as far away as what some people believe them to be. And luckily, they still have the bulk of their season to go, right? Like, they still have 7 games. And I will say, I don't want to still be having this conversation the week before USC, right? Of, man, they're just so close. They're just so close to figuring it out. So I'm hoping and hoping and hoping that this next 3-game stretch before their next bye, the improvements aren't us getting granular and looking at, oh, in this specific situation here, this one guy is doing better. I want it to be a very noticeable improvement. That's what I'm going to be looking for post the bye week until their next one. Is these next 3 weeks are going to be crucial to start seeing the receivers winning at the line of scrimmage and seeing that pre-snap and post-snap movement and switches are used a lot more and the sense of urgency stays consistent for 60 minutes of football. So as long as those things all start happening and going on, I'm going to be really happy.
Trevor, we're going to end this we have some super chats, so we're going to get into those to end the show today. We have our first one from Will Falk. Thank you, Will, very much for your super chat. Thanks so much for this analysis, Trevor and Bryan. Do y'all think something like speed option would help, or is that putting Riley at too much risk? I mean, look, I'm okay running speed option. I just don't know that that's something I'm incorporating 5 weeks into the season. That takes a lot of work to get down. That takes a lot of work to work on the mesh and the proper angle of the back and different things like that. And the running back being off by 4 inches can be the result in a clean pitch or a fumble. So that might be something that you would have thought about putting in the offseason, but I don't know that that's something that I would do now. I also think there's plenty of things you can do to attack a team in a very similar fashion to what you could with a speed option, that I think there's other ways to do it. And, like the delay quick pitch is a little bit easier to do. You'll see teams do where the quarterback will kind of shuffle, read that end, and if the end comes down, you pitch it out. If the end goes out, you're running some sort of quarterback power. I think quarterback power is a way to do that, where you're running off of a read, right? Where you've got the jet read and you're riding it and that guy goes out. I mean, that's sort of accomplishing a similar thing, but now you've got a cleaner handoff as opposed to trying to work the speed option. So, Will, there's nothing wrong with what you're saying, Will, and I think that is something that you could do at some point in time, but I just don't know that that's something I'm putting in mid-season unless I know I'm getting a really easy, clean option look, just because if it any kind of you get a look you haven't seen, defensive end plays it well. If you're not a team that runs it a lot, that can result in some really big mistakes. And that's why I kind of like the shovels and the Q reads and things like that, because of just a little bit of a different animal. And you're attacking the edge the same way. I mean, what you're doing on a power read is reading and handing off or keeping off of that edge the same exact way you would on a speed option. You're attacking the end man line of scrimmage and you're pitching off of them, right? Same thing on power read. You're reading off the last guy on the line of scrimmage and you're either handing the ball off on a jet, which is going to attack the same way that the speed option does, or your quarterback is keeping and getting inside, same thing as speed option does. But now it's a much lower risk exchange between the quarterback and that guy. So in theory, I have no problem with it. I've ran speed option as a coach before. It's just not something, Trevor, that I would consider doing midstream, just because of how much work it takes to get down. Thoughts on that?
Well, I ran it as a player and I was awful at it because I'm not fast. So, but no, I see where you're coming from, Will. I really do. And I think, to Brian's point, I think they would utilize something a little bit more like a jet motion, have Riley ride it out. And I could see a play like that, especially like inside of the red zone. I don't know how much they would just open up speed option from, 20-yard line to 20-yard line. So it's definitely a way to diversify the run game. And I saw when that super chat came in and is when we were talking about the different things that they could do. So I think your mind's on the right track, Will. I just don't think that right now, to Brian's point, middle of the season, I just don't know if that would be smart to put that in when they have other things that need correcting just in their base offense. So, but I hear you.
I have a super chat from Brandon Plensner. Thank you, Brandon. I haven't seen you in a while. Glad to see you in here today. Do you think less pulling and just more body on body could work at better Notre Dame's run game? Some of the pulling seems a bit much with guys currently. I don't think that at all. I think that was an issue last year, but I mean, on Saturday, they were just pulling one guy at a time on a quick kick out block. And I think that block was normally not the one that was causing the problems, Brandon. So I think in the past they were doing like all this pulling and stuff like that. I mean, they pretty much just did body on a body. And I went through there and it was inside zone or quarterback counter. And on the quarterback counter, there's only one guy pulling. It was either the center or the backside guard. And Rocco had a couple really nice blocks on kickouts, and I thought Pat Coogan had a couple really nice kickout blocks. Where they were getting beat was the body on a body inside zone stuff, is when they were getting pushed around. So I don't know that that's the issue. Again, is this a current makeup of the line with Rocco and Coogan, a line where I want to be having those two guys pin and pull all freaking day long? No. But are there some things you can do with that, as, like I said, a buck sweep or some kind of jet type action? Yeah. The problem that they did last year is they ran that exclusively. That was their primary run, was the pin and pull stuff, and that just wasn't going to work. But asking them to do pulls where they're quick kicking or wrapping around, that stuff's fine. And it worked. I mean, that stuff worked on Saturday early. It's just eventually they figured it out and adjusted to it, and you didn't have any answers for it. But no, that's not really my issue. And they are still primarily a downhill inside zone, as you say, body on a body type of guy, as a type of team. The problem is Louisville was crashing that stuff and making sure you couldn't get to the second level, which is why we talked about the need for some counters to that. We had a super chat from Win Carmody, did that and then provided the question. The question was chances that Notre Dame can win 3 games in the playoffs. Should they make it? 50% first game, 22nd, 10% third. Thoughts? I mean, when it just so much of it depends on where they seated and who are they playing.
Yeah.
I mean, if Notre Dame somehow is able to earn a 5 seed, they're probably feel much better than 50% in the first game. If Notre Dame is a home seed against the third or fourth best SEC or Big Ten team, I would say probably better than 50%. If Notre Dame's the 9, 10, 11, or 12 seed and they're going on the road, then yeah, 50% is probably a lot more likely, if not below. So it's really hard to give you an answer right now because I don't know who they're going to play or where they're going to be seated. It's like, a friend of mine called me and he was talking about, Heather Dinich had a report on the playoff and he said, what do you think of Heather Dinich? And I said, I respect Heather Dinich, one of the few reporters that I actually respect in the business because I think she does a pretty good job of actually doing homework and actually doing real reporting and things like that. And she's always been really good with the committee of letting people know. And he's like, well, she doesn't have Notre Dame in the 12-team playoff. I said, yeah, because it's week 5 and she's giving you her opinion of what she thinks the committee will do as opposed to talking to the committee. And she's also looking at it based on where teams are right now. And based on where teams are right now, Notre Dame is a borderline playoff team. Yeah, they've got a couple good wins, but they also have a bad loss. And you still have, I think, like 15 to 20 undefeated teams still. So it's impossible to predict. It's worthless to project it now. Let's see once these teams start playing each other. Let's see what people think about Notre Dame's chances if A&M goes and beats Missouri this weekend. Because then all of a sudden Notre Dame's in over Missouri, where right now Missouri's going to be in over Notre Dame because they're undefeated and Notre Dame's got a loss. It's still September, so it doesn't really matter. And so much of that's going to determine how Notre Dame is going to perform. I mean, and if they get a 5 or a 6 seed, then they're playing the ACC or Big 12 champ, most likely. Well, who's that going to be? Is that going to be Miami? That might be a different matchup than if you got to play Clemson,
Sure.
Right? Or is it going to be Kansas State or is it going to be Utah? Playing Miami is a whole lot different than playing Utah or K-State, who kind of are more in your wheelhouse. For what you do well. Miami, you might have to be a little bit better offensively. So there's just so much that goes into that. And honestly, right now, when this is a Notre Dame team that needs to worry about themselves right now, I need to see what changes happen during the bye week, personnel-wise, schematically, those type of things that are going to tell me how good Notre Dame is. Right now, I don't have a lot of confidence that Notre Dame can go beyond one game in the playoff if they make the playoff. Let me see what kind of changes they make. Then we can have a much deeper conversation about it. Is this team still talented enough to do that? Yeah, but I mean, this is also a little different team that we're not talking enough about as fans. Is like, this is a team they're down 3 starting offensive linemen. They're now down basically their best defensive end. I don't have a lot of hope that Boubacar Traore is going to play again this year. So you're now down, if he's out for the year, you're now down another defensive end. There's been a lot of really tough injuries that this team has had to deal with so far. Yeah. And if you don't make some of these changes offensively, schematically, and personnel-wise, it's going to make it a lot harder because your margin for error has gotten a lot thinner because you've had an abnormally high level of injuries. Now, I'm not using those as excuses because I still think even with the injuries, you've got a better roster than Georgia Tech. You got a better roster than Stanford. You got a better team than Florida State. And I still think you have a better roster than USC does. So it's not excuses for not going out there and performing, but you're getting to the point now where you have to be as good as you have to be at your best because you don't have that same margin for error because of all the injuries. So I just need to see what this team does out of the break before I'm ready to start talking about how deep of a run they can make in the playoff. That's my 2 cents on that, Trevor.
I agree. I don't have much more to add. It's too early. I know we were answering a lot of mailbag questions last week about conference winners and who could do this. And for me, it's so early before a lot of teams have even gotten into conference play and into the bulk of their schedule where they play ranked opponents. It's the same thing here. I mean, depends on the matchup. It depends on who's home, who's away. It depends on this, quote unquote injury bug that Notre Dame is going through right now starts to subside a little bit because, against Louisville, there were a lot of questions around, the secondary's deep, but you are one injury away from potentially having to, start getting a little bit nervous. And there was a portion of the game where Jordan Clark was playing field corner. So going to be interesting to see what decisions are made, but I think it's just too early, to Brian's point, to see who's going to do what.
let's get to this final chat here real quick. We actually have two now. We have one from Pete Weber. Congrats, Tyler Bang, on his military retirement. I think he said 22 years he was in the military. So number one, thank you for your service, my friend, very, very much. And number two, you know what, man, enjoy it. Enjoy this retired life. And I'm curious to kind of know what you got planned out going next. Next super chat is from Patrick Duffy. Patrick says, do you think part of the Indy passing weakness is because of Marcus Freeman's dedication to a running identity? You want to take that, Trevor?
Yeah. It could be a factor to it. I think schematically there's some things that they could do differently. They're such a run-heavy team, and I don't know if I've ever seen a run-heavy team so against using play action on more of a consistent basis, I will say. But I think a lot of the struggles in Notre Dame's passing game is what we kind of dissected today, Patrick. I gotta be honest with you. It's not just one thing. I wish I could say that it was, Marcus Freeman only wants to run the ball, or it's because of this offensive lineman, but it's really multifaceted, right? So is it a part of it, part of his overall scheme and his approach to offense? Potentially. But then that begs the question, why did you bring Mike Denbrock into town, right? Somebody who is known for having an explosive offense and just got done having statistically the best ranked offense in the country last year at LSU. I know personnel's a little bit different, but you bring in a guy like Mike Denbrock to change the landscape of your offense at Notre Dame. So could it be a factor? Potentially. I genuinely believe that it is more for the reasons that we talked about today. There's issues up front with pass protection. And no matter what people want to point the finger at, what wide receiver's not doing this and the quarterback's not looking at this, it all starts up front. Riley Leonard's rushing through his reads. It's because he doesn't have enough time up front. They can't run deeper developing routes down the field. Why? Because there's not enough time to get the ball off. So, yeah, I think, Patrick, it's more on that side than it is Marcus Freeman putting a handcuff on the passing game, because genuinely, I know he's came in and said we want to be a trenches-led team and we want to establish the run. I also don't think he's sitting in the coach's office on Monday morning saying, all right, guys, where are we capping the passing yards at for this week? I really don't. So that's my 2 cents into it, Patrick. Brian, what do you think?
I mean, I think that there are certainly aspects that I think there's something to this, but I think so. I will say it's part of it, yes. And it's not so much a running identity. It's more of this conservative, the head football coach said and believes that Miami of Ohio's defense was such that they were able to dictate to Notre Dame what they were going to do offensively. It's not so much a running identity, it's a conservative identity. And when I say conservative, I don't think running and being conservative are the same thing. I think, I don't view what Jim Harbaugh did, and I'm so tired of the trestle ball comment. That trestle ball won a freaking national championship and they beat Miami, right? Like, running the football is not conservative. If Notre Dame played trestle ball, they'd be 5-0. You guys get that, right? Like, please stop using the trestle ball excuse. It's groupthink. Trestle ball was really freaking good. Trestle ball had them beating Michigan regularly. Trestle ball had them beating Miami in the national championship game. Trestle ball had them playing LSU for another title in a year where they had no business playing for the title because of that team, right? Like, it's not about Trestle ball had them have a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. Okay, this isn't trestle ball. This is conservative, don't make a mistake football. That's what it is. We're going to allow trestle ball would have hung 50 on Miami of Ohio because they would have been aggressive going at them, running and throwing the ball down the field. Trestle ball would not have said, hey, let's let Miami of Ohio dictate to us what we're going to do defensively. Let's go out and play Northern Illinois and say, hey, let's not take any shots. Let's be conservative. That's not trestle ball. That's Marcus Freeman ball. Okay, because trestle ball didn't do that. Trestle ball, I believe, scored over 30 points against an elite Miami defense. Right? So that is not it. It's not trestle ball. If it was trestle ball, they'd be 5-0 right now.
Yeah.
Fact.
Yes.
So it's about, you've got to stop telling your team and creating a situation where your team, it just goes into the let's not F up mentality, right? That's what Notre Dame does now. And that's what they've done for the last couple of years. And then, at least last year we'd see them light it up against teams that weren't any good, but then we'd go back to the big games and it's right back to that same mentality. And when you consider all the issues they've had with the personnel this season, you get into that and you say, look, you've got to be more. You have an elite, great defense. It's okay to every now and then put them in situations where they got a short field to deal with, because it's like this. Take the same attitude with your offense that you're taking with your young players on defense. Yeah, occasionally they're going to give up a play or not. But overall, when you put the talent out there and you go on the attack on your opponent, then yeah, you may throw a pick here, have a fumble there, but you're going to score 40, and it doesn't matter. And you've got a great defense that can take care of it. And I thought that when you hire Mike Denbrock, that's a sign that you're changing your mentality. It doesn't look like that's happening so far, and there's some other reasons why. So, it's not running identity. Notre Dame could be a 40-plus point per game team and run for 250 yards a game. This notion that conservative equals running a lot, or conservative equals, this is because you have a running identity. I mean, honestly, what the fact is your three best players on offense are all runners. So you should probably have a running identity. But that doesn't mean that you have to have a conservative identity or a dull identity or a don't F up identity. You can still some of David Shaw's most explosive offenses ran the heck out of the football. Jim Harbaugh did not have a conservative offense last year at Michigan. They were an aggressive offense that didn't throw the ball a lot, but when they did, they were throwing bombs. But they were motioning and shifting and doing all these things to gain leverage advantages and numbers advantages, and it was great coaching. And so, it's not about running. It's about being conservative. It's about being afraid to make a mistake. Those are two different things. And in this conversation, we are not talking about if Notre Dame was just willing to pass the ball 30 times. No, it's be better at throwing the football. But it's all geared towards you are a running football team, or at least you are better at running the football right now. But you got to create more balance. And I just want to see this football team be more aggressive. But aggressiveness can also mean you're running the ball a lot, but you're mixing it up and you're taking some shots. You're running a quick pitch because you think you can crease them for a big play. Sometimes you run the football thinking you're going to house one. I mean, you go back to 2019. I remember a big play that Notre Dame had against USC that year, right? Was it USC or was that 2017? That's 2019. It's 2019. They did it against USC, where they knew that USC had an aggressive team. They're playing the run, so they didn't take shots. What did they do? They ran a reverse to Braden Lindsey, and it went out the gate for a touchdown. Then later in the year against BC, they ran a jet sweep to Braden Lindsey, went for a 60-yard touchdown. That was a run. It wasn't conservative, but it was, we're trying to create a big play. We're trying to attack you. We're trying to be aggressive. We're trying to dictate to you how this game is going to go. That's the mindset. It's not about throwing it 50 times a game. It's about you have an aggressive mindset. Well, we're going to dictate the tempo. We're going to dictate how you have to play defensively. We're going to do this thing on our terms. That's what great offenses do. David Shaw, when his offense at Stanford was rolling, was a running football team. But they dictated to you how you are going to have to defend them, not the other way around. He was going to always be prodding and poking to find your soft spot. And when he found it, he was going to try to go for the kill. That's different than being a conservative, don't screw up mentality. And that's what we have to kind of come to grips with is this, I would be okay with trestle ball because that freaking worked. This isn't trestle ball. Now, I'm not okay bringing a 2002 style offense into 2024. But it comes down to you've got to be willing to be aggressive and set the tone, set the tempo as the very word offense. Go on the offensive. You are the attacker. Force the defense to react to what you're doing. And I believe that's what Mike Denbrock wants to be at his heart. And also the other thing is, if we're being real about it, it's harder to do that when your tight end's not playing the way you need them to play, when your offensive line can't pass pro you need to. And this gets into the stuff you were talking about, Trevor, when your receivers aren't playing with a lot of precision and urgency. You can have all the plays in the world you want. I've seen Mike Denbrock call some pass plays where you just give him a second and a half more time to throw, that's a touchdown.
Yeah.
You know, if you would have just executed this play, if you would have just given a better release off the line, that's a touchdown.
Yep.
So there's also an attention to detail that's lacking from this football team. And, you know, it's like Marcus Freeman said it. You saw him. We're so effing undisciplined. Yeah, you are. Fix it. Get back to, hey, look, we're going to be aggressive, but part of being aggressive is I need precision. I need, you know what I mean? I need you to run this route this way. I need you to run it fast with this type of technique and this. Those are, and it doesn't mean about, you know, hey, you got to throw it a million times. That's not what we're talking about. But being aggressive is you're dictating to the defense what they're trying to do. What you have is a defensive coordinator who looks at football as an entire entity, how he looked at it as a defensive coordinator. And he can't have that. You are a head football coach now. And you have to understand, you have to look around the country and say, what's working? And the teams that are competing for championships can score. They score in very different ways. Some run a lot, some throw a lot, but they can score. They dictate to you what you're going to do. They dictate the tempo. They dictate the terms. And that's what the best teams do. And not just on defense, because that's exactly what Notre Dame does on defense.
Mm-hmm.
But until he is willing to put that onto the offense and then demand, you know, the offense demand precision, demand this, and you're going to continue to see this, especially in the bigger games. But again, we're also coming off of a game where Notre Dame scored 31 points against a top 15 football team. Now, they had some help from some short fields, but let's be honest, the way that Notre Dame's offense was playing early, if their third drive would have gotten their own 35, they would have gone down and scored.
Yeah.
I mean, Louisville had no answers for them. It wasn't until that fumble that then what happened? Then it was pull the reins back. We're not gonna screw up. No, but early in that game, they were taking the fight right to Louisville, and Louisville had no answers. When they made it a one-score game in the fourth quarter, what did Notre Dame do? They went right down the field. They dictated the tempo. They dictated the terms with their motions and movements. They dictated the terms of their play calls, and they went right down the field and scored. Be that all the time.
Yeah.
Learn the lesson that Bama learned this weekend, Trevor. You thought 28-7 was enough against Georgia, and you called off the Dogs. And next thing you know, the Dogs, you know what I mean, came back. You know what I mean? Put that pedal to the metal, Trevor. That's what I want to see.
100%. I mean, me and my buddy talk about this all the time. And in the stage of where college football is at now, like it's not good enough anymore to just win. It's by how much you win. How good did you look in the win? And so, yes, winning is still a factor. Obviously, a win is always going to be better than a loss 100 times out of 100. I understand that. But for Notre Dame, there have been games, and this is not just specific to this year. There have been countless years that I can't even tell you how many, where I thought Notre Dame could have beat a team by 50. They have the ability to. They're just clearly better than a team. And then you have games that just end like in a 28-7 final score. You know, and it's just it's the lack of aggressiveness for me, which really bothers me. Like it's just, if there is a word that I could use to sum up this offense as a whole, it's just inconsistency. It's inconsistent in every sense of the word. The coaching has been inconsistent. The play at every individual person that has came into this offense, for the most part, I will say, except for Jeremiah Love. That is the one guy that I will give a pass to. Everybody except for Jeremiah Love has been extremely inconsistent for the most part throughout this entire season. The play calling has been inconsistent. The plan of attack has been inconsistent. The use of motion has been inconsistent. So I think, Patrick, to your point for this, I think it's Marcus Freeman's overall mentality of don't mess up is more not just running the football. And there's two trains of thoughts that you can look at, right? When you have a really good defense, You can do what Dabo Swinney did in 2016. They had a really good defense. Deshaun Watson threw 17 interceptions that year. But you have a really good defense, and Deshaun Watson also had accounted for 40 of their touchdowns. So kind of makes up for it, right? There's two trains of thoughts when you have a really good defense. It's either, well, we can just play it safe and edge out a win when we need to because our defense is so good. Or you can look at it and say, hey, we can be a little riskier. We can take risks. I would understand if this was Marcus Freeman's style of play, if the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. I would understand if this was his, we got to kind of grind stuff out and be methodical.
Shorten the game, limit possessions. Right.
Yeah, let's not force the ball down the field and make a mistake and give somebody the football on the doorstep. But based on some of the early advantages that Louisville had with the fumbled kick return and all that other stuff, based on the flow of the game, you would have thought Louisville's offense was going to get ready to also put up 30, 40 points but the defense is that good. So use that mentality and that we have a fantastic defense and take more risks. No, I'm not saying abandon the run and throw 4 verts every single play until stuff breaks free, but you got to find a way to be more consistent.
Aggressive running the football, Trevor. That's the whole point.
Yes.
And protect. This team's going to be a run first team. At no point in time today do we say otherwise. That's okay. That doesn't mean you can't go out there and score a lot more points. You should still be able to score a lot more points. But this team being barely a 30-plus point per game team, it's I don't care. I know the injuries. You still played MAC teams. Your third-string offensive lineman should still be able to go out there and have some success against Northern Illinois and Miami of Ohio. I'm sorry. It just, again, it comes down to a mindset. And again, when you try to turn that switch on and off, then sometimes you're thinking you're turning it on, but you're not turning it on. It just needs to be who you are all the time.
100%.
And again, that doesn't mean throw the ball 50 times a game. It doesn't mean you're throwing nothing but bombs. It just means you're taking the fight to the opponent. You're telling your offense, run through them. You know what I mean? Just bury them. Whatever whatever that means. That could come out first drive of the game and run 10 straight runs. I don't care if it means you're doing some different things to create some big play opportunities and you're dictating to them what they're going to do. Yeah. When I watched Michigan against Penn State last year not throw a single pass in the second half. They weren't just lining up in the same formation, running inside zone, trying to get out of a game. They were creating big plays with their running game by motions and shifts and doing things where until Penn State changes how they're going to line up, we're going to keep going right at that spot. That's aggressiveness. That's taking the fight to them. That's not saying we're going to let them dictate to us. When your head football coach says, Miami, Ohio forces you to be methodical. What in the absolute heck are we talking about? Well, that's just coach speak. No, because that's exactly how they played on offense during that game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not coach speak when it's followed up by action. Then it's who you are. And we've 100%. Also learned that Marcus Freeman is a very honest man when it comes to his, and I respect him for that. And that's the thing is Marcus Freeman does so many things incredibly well at Notre Dame. And important things that are like championship caliber things. You know what I mean? Like recruiting. This to me is one of the 3 final pieces to the puzzle. Consistency and preparation is one, to where your team is able to not have such the emotional roller coasters, right? Your strength conditioning program is still a wait and see. I'm concerned because of how many injuries there are. Maybe it is strength, maybe it's not strength. That's a wait and see approach. And then the third thing is this mentality of your offensive football team, because it bleeds into your entire team.
Yep.
And imagine how great your defense would be, because here's the thing. I think you said it, and then I know Vince said it last night. This is one of the few games we've seen the last 2 years where the defense came out of the gate struggling, and the offense is the one that kind of gave them that early spark.
Yeah.
While the defense gave up an immediate touchdown. Yeah, on a short field, but they had 2 blown coverages on that first drive. First play of the second drive, you completely blow a read zone. Quarterback's taken off. He's in their one play. They started that drive at their own 6-yard line, I believe, right? 7-yard line, something like that. One play, you're in Notre Dame territory. And and then you come up, you knock it out. Like, okay, but you're still reeling. Yeah, great play, Leonard Moore, but you still haven't found answers to to Louisville's offense yet. And then your offense goes down 53 yards, puts another touchdown on the board, and just like that, despite the fact you're kind of reeling a little bit out of the gate, you've got a 14-7 lead. Then your defense makes a stop. That special teams forces a bad play. But my point is, if they'd have punted that ball off, I have every confidence in the world the way that Notre Dame was playing that they're going right down the field and scoring another touchdown. Might have even been better for them because it would have taken more time off the clock.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, and so, but that took a lot of pressure off your defense. It gave them time to adjust. Have that mindset more often where you're going to take the fight to your opponent and then keep it. And when you get a 21-7 lead, don't back off of it just because you had one mistake from your running back, right? You know what I mean? Like, those are the things that I want to see. And, you know, there's some things holding this offense back from they're not going to be what we hoped they would be this summer. Yeah. Because they don't have Charles Jagasol. They don't have Ashton Craig. They don't have Billy Schrouth. They don't have Mitchell Evans that we saw last year. I mean, those are just realities. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean they can't be better than what they are now. They don't have to have a this is who we are, let's try to make the most of it mentality. It's no, let's fix this and get the most out of what we have, which is going to make us a much better football team. If they do that, I think this team's going to come out of the break smoking hot. If they don't do that, then it's just going to be a full season of what we've seen the first 5 games, which this is a good football team, and they're going to win a lot of games, but they're not going to be the team that they should be. And that's going to limit them, even if they do make the playoff, which is not a given because this team has shown that they're we decided not to show up day moment away from losing a game, right? Yeah. And now all of a sudden, you know, you've got a loss you shouldn't have. So kind of here's where that's where we are with that, Trevor, is if you can become the team you're capable of being, maybe this isn't a championship team. Maybe it isn't. Right now, it hasn't been. But you can still be a darn good football team that makes a playoff run, you know, win a couple games if you can get this part of the ball fixed. And not fixed like you're back to the team we thought. Look, I'm saying they're not going to be that team. At least I see no evidence they're going to be that team that I thought they were going to be. This isn't me still holding on to my preseason hype or hope, I should say, of what they were or man, I think this is I'm not expecting Chris Mitchell to all of a sudden come out of the break looking like the Florida International version of Chris Mitchell. I've given up on that until I see it. No need to discuss it. But even with that, it doesn't mean that this can't still be a lot better. And that's my point. It still can be a lot better. It won't be what we thought it was going to be, but a lot better. And that's all they really need with the defense they have to run the table. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, if you're somebody that firmly believes that Notre Dame's offense has reached its ceiling and this is as good as it's going to get, you just haven't been paying attention to the signs. Now, is there a chance that performance-wise it could stay this way if a coaching change, like if a schematic change isn't made, like from the coaching staff, or if an identity shift doesn't happen? I think that's a potential, but they're not capped out from a talent perspective. That is the one thing that everybody at Irish Breakdown has been steadfast on, is it's not a talent thing. If anything, it's the exact opposite. You have a loaded roster with a lot of talent. Find different ways to use them instead of just banging Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Riley Leonard into the teeth of the defense, just waiting for something to break open. So as long as there is some sort of shift schematically with what this offense is going to do, you could make the argument that they're nowhere near close to their ceiling, because you're not going to convince me that Riley Leonard is not capable of passing for more than 200 yards in a game. You're not going to convince me that Jeremiah Love can only go for 70 yards in a game at any given day. This offense is nowhere near close to their ceiling. And if the offense grows and the defense stays the exact same and makes no improvements, which I also don't think is going to be the case, this team is going to do some things. I'm not saying they're nowhere near close to getting ready to make a deep playoff run. They're nowhere near close to be able to compete with an Ohio State, with a Texas, with an Alabama, with a Georgia. But they are not as far away as what some people think. Things need to change. Let me say that loud and clear. This cannot be the same team right now on October 1st as it is when it gets to end of December and into January. But this team, if they start making moves and start making the correct adjustments, I think it will put a lot of the stressors to bed for a lot of different people. And I'm hoping that this bye week is the first step in that, and they continue to build on it. That's where I'm at.
Trevor, that's a great way to end it right there, man. That's gonna do it for today's show. Thanks everybody for being with us today. 5:00 tonight, Ivy Nation Sports Talk. Sean Stiers is gonna be there. Trevor, are you gonna be on with him tonight by chance, or is Vince going
No,
on?
that's I'll be on Thursday with him.
Thursday. Okay, perfect. So 5:00 tonight, Ivy Nation Sports Talk. Make sure you check that out. Tomorrow, 1:00 p.m., Trevor and I will be back to talk more Notre Dame football and buy, sell, hold. So I don't know if Salty's put up the post yet, but there will be a buy, sell, hold post on the board today. That is for premium members only. So if you are a premium member, get your buy, sell, hold submission in. We'll do a longer buy, sell, hold tomorrow because we're not going to do a full topical show before. We may just go right to buy, sell, hold. So get those in. But, there might be some stuff that comes up. We may talk about Antavius Richardson during the show tomorrow. We may use that time to kind of break down his commitment for 20, 30 minutes and then dive into the buy, sell, hold. So make sure if you're a member, get those questions in on buy, sell, hold. Thursday, we'll do this for the defense. It'll take a lot different tone than this one did, obviously, because that side of the ball is going to be really big. So we'll check that out on Thursday as well. And somebody just said it is on the board. So there you go. Salty did his job. It is on the board. So get those buy, sell, holds in there. It can be anything Notre Dame team related, anything college football related, anything recruiting related. Make a submission. You're making a statement, and then we're either buying it, selling it, or holding it. It's not a Q&A. That will be Friday for the mailbag when Trevor and I do the mailbag. So we'll get to that as well. So everybody, that's why you need to be on the boards at IrishBreakdown.com. That is our premium message board for subscribers only. We have breakdown videos. We have all types of intel on there that you can only find there. You're definitely going to want to check that out for sure. So for Trevor, I'm Bryan. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you tomorrow, 1 p.m. on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.